All right, here we go. On three. 1, 2, 3. What's up, everybody? Welcome to this episode of True Crime and Cocktails. We're so glad that you're here. As always, I am your host, Lauren Ash, and as always, I am joined by my co-hostess with the mostess, Christy Oxborrow. How you feeling?
It's easy to say tickled pink because you just like seconds as we're recording, seconds before you started us off, you made a face that was the most Rowan Atkinson thing I've ever seen. And it took me back to the childhood of watching Mr. Bean. So I was tickled.
Shout out to Mr. Bean.
Yes.
Yeah, I started to choke on my own saliva, is the truth. So I had just a light cough, and then I was just like, why does this happen the second we hit record? And that was what I was conveying in my face. So
it was good. Something about it read Teddy to me. That was bad, but you knew what I meant.
I knew exactly what you meant. Yes, I absolutely do. I absolutely do. Well, listen, I gotta say, it's an evening. It's an evening time, and could not be happier to be here. And I have something I need to address right at the get.
I can't wait.
So in Los Angeles, California, where I obviously am located, we're in a bit of a heat wave, which is not abnormal. August, September. This is the time where it gets
no kidding. September.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then September also marks fire season, which is also something that's,
right.
How is that a season? Well, I'll tell you, usually it's because there's a heat wave, things get dry, and
that all checks out.
Not great. But so the temperature is getting up to like 108 in the valley where I'm at. Yeah, it's
42 degrees Celsius.
Thank you for that.
Anyone else? Yeah.
Yeah. For anyone other than America. Only place in the world.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. I looked it up after you told me. I was like, ooh, that sounds bad. And then I was like, oh, it is.
It is.
Yeah.
It's bad. But so here's a couple things. One, I realized I had to send Christy a frantic text earlier because I was like, I know that we were supposed to start at a certain time, but we're going to need to push it because I need to wait for the sun to go down like a vampire. Because I was like, I can't turn off my air conditioning units. And if you've listened to this show before, you probably know that I have the loudest air conditioning units on the planet. It's central air in the house, but it is like living in an airplane hangar. It is exceptionally loud. And the house can heat up. I mean, it can get up to 80 degrees in here, sometimes even hotter when we're doing one of these records, and then I get dopey, whatever. Long story short, but what arrives on my doorstep today? A package. A large package. And I was like, I didn't order this. And the UPS guy is like, this for you? I was like, yeah, I guess so. What are you questioning me? Anyway, it's fine. He does great work. It's not a judgment, but it was just a weird, I don't know.
If it has your name on it,
I don't know.
Let her have it.
Oh gosh. Anyway, so I open it, and what's in there? Well, Lady Jane here, my co-hostess, with the mostess for real, has sent me a fan. Because we've talked about this on the show before, that it's like, I need to get a fan that's like as silent as possible so that I can have that blowing on me. Because when this house heats up during these records, it gets so hot. It is, I cannot express to you just how hot it gets and how quickly. And listen to that right now. Can you hear it?
We can't.
Exactly.
We as though I'm speaking for everybody. The collective we. Yes.
And I'd like you to know, I'm almost too cold.
Hey.
And it's
that's nice.
It's a dream. It's on its lowest setting. I'm freezing. It's silent. And I just had to say, what an angel human who truly, because I keep forgetting. I just forget to buy myself one. I forget to order it. But you didn't, and I thank you.
Oh, I after our last one, I think it was maybe a last call that we did. I think we did a last call, or maybe it was a happy hour or something. And when we were done, you were like, it's outrageous in here, because you had gone out and you left your air off. And then when you came back, it was just roasting, and we had to wait to give the pets some air.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, she needs a fan. So I was like, I need to Google look at reviews, what's quiet. I just need something that's quiet that she could use. And then I ordered it that night and they were like, it'll be there Saturday. And I was like, good. It'll be there before I record. And then Saturday comes and goes and they're like, oh, that's weird. Sorry. Did we say Saturday? We meant between Sunday and Tuesday. And I was like, all right. They're like, if it doesn't show up Tuesday, let us know. And you have to go through so many steps to let them know because it's not easy anymore.
Right.
So I'm like, okay. And then I texted you. I didn't want you to know at all. I wanted it to just show up and be this fun surprise. And then I texted you. It was just like, hey. So, like, did anything arrive at your house yesterday? And you're like, no, was it supposed to? I'm like, I'm just checking your mail situation. And then, yeah, I thought for sure it was lost and never to be found. And I'm like, oh, I'll just refund it and then I guess reorder it maybe. And then today you were like, guess what? I was like, well, thank God.
The timing couldn't have been better because there was also a chance we were going to record yesterday, but then we didn't for whatever reason. And so it was just, again, what a gift in my life. Not only the gift, but you. I thank you.
I couldn't be happier. I want you a little too cold.
I'm happier a little too cold in general. Yeah.
Look, I'll say it. When we record, I am always in a short and I have a like a piece of ducting that goes from under my husband's desk, which is beside me, and like snakes around so that the air conditioner will like blow directly on my legs. But then I also have a blanket. And then sometimes the blanket, sometimes it's just over my lap so that my legs can get chilly. And as we keep going, the blanket lowers, the blanket comes up. I need to be, you can't be too hot, you can't be too cold. So yeah.
I will absolutely be getting a blanket on the break. I'm frigid. It's great. Again, it's not a complaint. It's not a complaint. I always want to be frigid every moment of my damn life. Every moment of my life, I want to be cold. Much rather be cold than warm.
Did you think in high school, as an adult, you would ever say the phrase, I want to be frigid?
No. And I don't mean it in the other implication. I'm not
Of
a frigid.
course.
I'm no prude. I'm no frigidaire. You know what I mean?
If they've heard this show before, they know.
You're right. What am I saying? What am I saying? But listen, this brings me to one other thing very quickly. Doorbell rings yesterday and there's a gentleman there and he's got a package in his hand and he's like, hey, he named his name. I won't name his name. He named his name and he was like, I'm from the next street over. And this was delivered to my house in error. And I've been waiting for a package. So I opened it. I'm sorry. But here it is. And he was like, obviously it's from Amazon. Also, it wasn't. And he was like, and I do apologize. And I was like, oh, that's okay. And then I was like, wait, where are you? He's like, same number on the other street. And I was like, okay. And he was very nice, older man. But then I was like, it's face products. And I'm like, should I be using these? Is this true? Or did this person take this from my porch, realize they can't use it and put it back? Or is this something even worse where it's like, I mean, we have this podcast. Of course, I trust no one or nothing. And then I'm like, have these been tampered with? Is there something that's been put into my products now? I mean, these go on my face. I'm worried about this. But also I'm out of my products. So I also I need to use them.
Look, we've maybe been doing this too long. Because instantly I'm like, is there another number of that same on a street over?
I guess that's what I should check. And if there is, then it feels like it's like, well, his story is probably true. But if there isn't.
I mean, I'm closer to believe took it off the porch and then opened it and went, oh, I can't use this. But I'm surprised he didn't just dump it somewhere or put it back on the step and run. Like instead it was like, have to make a thing about it.
Yeah.
But then to your point, like if you put it on, like what LSD has he put in it? Is there also a camera so he can watch the LSD effects on you?
Oh God.
Because this is who I've become.
I mean, there's nothing in the package that wasn't supposed to be in the package for sure. But the problem is that you could easily open all of these things, do something to it, put your dick in it or something, and then close it up again. I'm just calling it like I see it.
Oh, he could have absolutely fucked a jar of facial cream.
Right?
But then I think too much would come out. Why?
But he might have just placed it in there. Like he could have just placed it and then
Oh, I
removed it, and
assumed
I
he
would
like
never have
went.
known.
I assume once he got in, he couldn't stop himself from completing.
If this is about, I don't think this is for pleasure. I think that this is just for hijinks. So it's like he wants to like, oh yeah, now like my dick sweats on her face. You know what I mean? Like that's what I think that the
Okay, so it was like a playful tea bag.
Yeah, with a little
Okay.
bit, but not with good intentions. I don't know
No,
if
so
that's
it's like
playful, but
it's like an episode of Jackass, but instead of your friends, it's like strangers you're doing these things to.
yeah.
Oh my God, if this old man has a prank show somewhere on YouTube and he's like filming these bits.
But then yeah, exactly. Well, I guess then he'd be like, and now she's gonna put it on her face. We'll never see a reaction, but ooh, did I get her?
Okay, so it's the worst prank show when you don't get to see the prank come to fruition. Yeah, look, I get that we should just be trusting of people, maybe nowadays. No, that's terrible advice. Trust no one. No. Yeah, I'm very quick to be like, what's wrong with it? What have you done? Like, do the products have any sort of seal on them?
No, that's the problem. They're like in individual boxes, but they're not sealed. Like there's no like shrink wrap or anything.
Right.
They're expensive too. So I'm like, I because it's the True Botanicals that Olivia Wilde uses in the commercials that I literally bought because I was like, what? Her skin looks great. And
she got Harry Styles.
I mean, their advertising worked, is my point.
And anyway, their advertising just had to be her dating him.
That's it. I was like, well, her skin is good, and wow, it's good enough for her much younger, he's not more beautiful than her. That's not what I meant. A very beautiful, much younger boyfriend. Yeah, listen, again, I fell prey to it, is my point. Anyway, I like the products. I've become accustomed to a certain, not all of them, but there's a couple of them I've put into my routine. And now it's like, look, I don't know what to do.
You'll love this. Now that Harry's come up, and I know that he's a pawn in this.
Yeah. He's a player in the game. Yeah.
Now that I know Harry Styles has entered the game. Yeah, I'll put the teabag cream on my face. If it gives me skin like Olivia Wilde,
right?
I'll just quietly put it on and hope for the best. Well, first check and see if there is that number anywhere on any of the streets nearby.
That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make sure that house exists. And if it does, then I think I'll trust it.
We could also do a quick background check on the person who lives in that house.
That's another thing we can do. Because I know his first name. I don't know his last name, but we can at least confirm. We can confirm that he lives there.
We can confirm. Well, I'm writing this down.
That's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
We'll follow up about this next week, dear listeners. No one is invested in this story but us, but maybe a handful of you.
Oh, there's going to be some comments that are like, what are you talking about? I'm more invested than you.
You're right.
So, yeah. Come on.
These are our people. You're right. The only other thing I was going to say is the only other thing that felt fishy was he was like, I've been waiting for a package from Amazon. And so I just opened it without looking at it, which I can understand. But then I'm like, what are the chances that it would be the same size box? I mean, I guess high? I don't know. The whole thing just felt odd. But again, I can never tell. At first, I thought nothing of it. And then all of my true crime experience came rushing up where it was like, don't put your finger in there.
Well, now I'm like, oh, shit. Now I'm just thinking he could have simply been like, I didn't have my glasses on. And I opened it and it was a surprise, but a weird, like, well, I was expecting something, which is why I opened it.
It's like, weird. And also, what were you feverishly waiting for from Amazon? Also, it had been like surgically opened, like it had been like cut with a knife, like very.
Oh, Someone got himself a Nintendo Switch recently, I bet, and he just got himself a new Mario game. That's my guess.
Well,
oh, can you order Viagra on Amazon?
oh, maybe. But maybe Amazon's the lie. Maybe he's lying about it being Amazon.
Oh.
Because he said Amazon so many times, and he was like, because this is from Amazon too. And I didn't push back in the moment, but I was like, it's not from Amazon. But I guess to his point, he didn't read the label. But then why is he assuming? Doesn't matter. The point is,
he was chomping at the bit for his package to arrive.
His package for his package, potentially.
I was going to say for his package to arrive. Why?
Because it's what we do. It's what we do. It's what
it is what we do. Again, could be the sweetest old man in the world. Could be a young man aged up in makeup. this
prank show issue. Yeah.
This is my problem, because I constantly am like, is this person who they're claiming to be? I don't know. We've seen so many things now that you trust no one.
Nope. Nope. Never. Never, ever. No. I'll say this. The address does exist. According to the internet, the address does exist. So that's something.
Yes.
But I'm trying to get the owner records because the first name that came up doesn't match. But he might rent. What if he rents from the owner? Damn it.
What if his son is the one who's the owner? Well, and he's living there because he's an old, feeble man. Why do I assume he's
really writing a story?
You know I like a story.
We both do.
It helps me get by. But yeah, I like that I've written down. I had old man at with your house number and I wrote a space to write the street name. I've now just given it a check mark to know, yes, that does exist. We just need to make sure the old man is who he says he is.
We sure do. We're on it, dear listeners. We're going to get to the bottom of this, whether you like it or not.
And what I like is it shows you this is genuinely who we are.
Yep. Yes, ma'am.
Like, if I was there when that package happened and that incident occurred, she would have brought the package in, closed the door, and we would have done this.
Yep.
And we would have talked about it. We would have probably put on a glove while we went through it. Mm-hmm. Shit, do you have access to a black light?
I do. I do.
For finding Cappy.
Yes, because again, Peaches, God bless her, she's blind. She has accidents. So I got one because I was getting a cleaner.
Yes.
And it came with one.
Maybe do a little black light on the box.
Mm-hmm. That tells the tale.
Yeah. What I like is how quickly it was, do you have access to a black light? I do. And then it's animal urine. Yes.
Yeah.
God, we are parallel lives.
Oh, we are. But listen, anyway, I've derailed us because I know that you have an update on a past case, and I'd love to hear about it.
I do. I did just a quick write-up about it because, of course, once I see it, I have to give the update. But I've gone too far because now I'm giving just a very tiny synopsis about that episode in case anybody has not heard that yet. But
God bless you.
Back in April, we did an episode, specifically episode number 80, about crime boss James Whitey Bulger.
Ooh.
So if you haven't listened to that episode yet, this will be a spoiler. So if you need to skip ahead, by all means. If you don't want the update and you want to skip ahead, by all means. If you want to not tell us you skipped ahead, by all means.
That's the big one.
That's okay. So as a quick refresher, Whitey Bulger ran the Winter Hill Gang, aka the Irish Mob, in Boston throughout the 70s and 80s. It was believed that Whitey became an informant for the FBI to rat out his main rival. Whitey always denied being any sort of informant. Whitey then skipped town with a girlfriend, and they went on the run for 16 years. Whitey was on FBI's most wanted list and was finally captured in California in June 2011. Whitey pleaded not guilty to various charges. It included 19 murders, In November 2013, after a 2-month trial, Whitey was found guilty on 31 criminal counts, including participation in 11 murders. He was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences plus 5 years. His girlfriend, who went on the run with him, Catherine Grieg, was sentenced to 8 years for aiding and abetting a fugitive. Whitey spent time in various prisons before being transferred on October 29th, 2018 to Hazleton Penitentiary in northern West Virginia. Within 12 hours of the transfer, Whitey was found dead in his cell at 8:07 a.m. He was 89 years old. There were security cameras outside of the cells, and 3 inmates were seen at Whitey's cell at 6:07 that morning. Now, I can't say most of these names. This is going to get hard. Photius Freddie Gios, Paul J. DeColagero, and then, thank God, Sean McKinnon. That was helpful. I'm just going to refer to them by their first names just to be easier. So, Sean was the lookout. Freddie and Paul entered Whitey's cell and remained there for 7 minutes, according to the security footage. So while Sean waited outside, Freddie and Paul used a belt with a lock attached to it to bludgeon Whitey to death. Despite seeing these specific men on camera at Whitey's cell just 2 hours before he was found dead, the investigation dragged, and somehow the men weren't actually charged until August 19th, 2022.
Ooh.
Again, I remind you, the crime occurred in October 2018. And there was security camera footage of the suspects entering his cell. All 3 were charged with conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, while Freddie and Paul were also charged with aiding and abetting first-degree murder and assault resulting in serious bodily injury. Sean was charged with making false statements to a federal agent. So now they've finally been charged. I guess we just wait and see if there's a trial, or maybe they plead guilty and there's no trial. I don't know. It's just surprising to me when we do a case that's an older one and then there's like a newish update, like Madeleine McCann. We did that. And then all of a sudden it was like someone in Europe listened to our podcast and went, we got to dig under that house. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. Yes, ma'am.
But while we're on the topic of these 3 men who are now officially charged in the death of Whitey Bulger, just a small background on these 3 gentlemen. Paul J. DeColagero, who is now 48, was convicted of buying heroin that was supposed to be used to kill 19-year-old Ashlyn Silva in November 1996. Paul's uncle, who is also named Paul, so it's a very confusing family/gang. The uncle stashed some guns at Ashlyn's house because Ashlyn's boyfriend, Steven DeCenzo, worked for this uncle. And he was like, yeah, you want a place to store your guns? Store them at my lady's house. I don't know where his lady, I got nothing. So DeCenzo then tells the uncle Ashlyn was nervous and that she would probably cooperate with the police if they ever asked. So the uncle decided that Ashlyn needed to be taken out. So the plan was for her to overdose on heroin. But when that didn't work, the uncle had another member of his crew break her neck.
Jesus.
Then the killer, the uncle, and Paul all dismembered the body and buried her in the woods. Ashlyn's hair and blood were found in a garbage can behind a Danvers car wash in 1997, but her body wasn't found until December 2006, 10 years later.
Wow.
The uncle was sentenced to life in prison, plus 25 years for murder, racketeering, and firearms charges. 6 members of his gang were convicted for their involvement in Ashlyn's death, including Paul, who was sentenced to a term of 25 years for racketeering and witness tampering. He is scheduled to be released in June 2026, but that will likely get pushed due to these new charges for Whitey's murder.
Right.
But that's why he was in prison at the time when Whitey was there.
Got it.
Then we got Freddie, who's now 55. He is just a known mafia hitman. He was sentenced to life in prison in 2011 for his role in multiple violent events, including the 2003 murder of the Genovese crime boss Adolfo Big Al Bruno.
Okay.
So that's why he was in prison at the time. And then there's Sean McKinnon. He's now 36. He was recently on a supervised release until he was arrested for being involved in Whitey's murder. Prior to that, he was in Hazleton when Whitey arrived because he was convicted in 2015 of stealing a dozen handguns from a firearms dealer in Vermont. In March 2021, McKinnon went public to say that since Whitey's death, he had been living in solitary confinement. At the time, he also claimed that all three of them were innocent. He was moved to a halfway house in February 2022, released in July, and then picked up in August for Whitey's murder. He is now back in jail.
It's wild that there was video footage and he
Claimed
was
they were
released.
innocent.
And he was released.
Yeah. For me, it's the fact that they try to say they're innocent when it's like, oh, sirs, they have camera footage of you outside the cell and then leaving the cell several minutes later and nobody else entering until he was found dead. So, I mean, that's pretty open and shut, if I may, but
You may.
But Hazleton, the prison where all of this happened, is known for disliking snitches. And thanks to Whitey's trial, it was very common knowledge that Whitey might be a snitch. Again, he denied it until his death, but he was called a snitch and then placed in general population of a prison known to hate snitches. So it feels like his death was planned by someone high enough to get him transferred, especially when they were caught on camera and waited almost 4 years before charging them.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that Whitey was a good guy, but this screams like a cover-up of a warden or some sort of high-ranking official who arranged for it, or the mob allowed it to happen, or something. I know the justice system isn't in a hurry to prosecute inmate-on-inmate violence, as the perpetrator is already behind bars, so they just don't care as much. Maybe that's why it took so long. Apparently, there were 2 other inmates murdered in 2018, and charges have not been laid in those cases either.
Okay.
So maybe it's not a big cover-up or conspiracy, but maybe it is. You know what I mean? I am always quick to be like, what's going on there? And when you have footage and you know who the people are, and then you're like, we're still investigating. I just stop it. Like, there's got to be something to me that's there.
Yeah. It also feels like the fact that Freddie was a known mafia hitman feels like could be as simple as the mafia was like, take him out.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that simple.
Oh, yeah. I'm also convinced that it was like, by the way, Warden, that's going to happen, and you're just going to let it go.
100%. I mean, if you haven't listened to that episode, go back and listen to that episode, because it is fascinating to like hear about just how much the FBI and like it's, I mean, it's Laura Nash's biggest fear realized, which again is like crooked cops.
Of course.
But yeah, it feels, as you know, I've said on this show many times, sometimes the simplest explanation is true. And in this case, it's like, it's not random. It doesn't feel like it was random. This feels like it was planned. And it feels the simplest explanation is, someone wanted him dead.
Yep.
And then people were told to ignore it. And those people went, okay, because there's deals and there's all kinds of, all kinds of things, which again, if you get too deep into it, it terrifies me. So, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Oh, it has to be. He was there for less than 12 hours. There was also no reason for him to go there and get transferred.
And that feels like
that's the other
too.
thing.
Yeah.
Well,
this is also reminding me that we had talked about recreating the video of him and the other guy who I can't remember who it was, because in court, one of them was on the stand.
Yeah.
One of them yelled,
fuck you too. Yeah.
And we were going to recreate that, which I've not taken off the table, by the way.
Of course.
Um,
Of course. Again, it just
wow.
gets me in a beard again.
Which is a dream for everybody.
Which you know is where I shine.
Yeah. Well, you always shine, but yes,
Oh,
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well,
but listen, that was an amazing update.
I just couldn't believe it's like, really, after all this time, now they're getting charged. All right.
And to your point, I don't know what the protocol is. The fact that there was other murders that happened that year in the prison that haven't been dealt with yet makes it feel like, okay, well, it may not be that that's some part of some bigger conspiracy.
Sure. Oh, I know. Because I'm instantly like, well, do you have camera footage of those other 2 incidents? Or is it just like you don't know? It's the fact that they were like, yeah, we saw the 2 of them go in and we saw the one stand outside. They were in for 7 minutes. So it's like,
it's also such a brutal murder. I mean, he was an old man at this point.
Yeah, he was 89.
89, and they bludgeoned him to death with a lock. Like, good Lord.
Like yeah. It's
brutal. I'm not laughing only because I'm so uncomfortable. Like, it's like, that's such a horrific thing to do to anybody. But certainly at that point, it was like, there were ways that they could have killed him that would have not been as horrific in those 7 minutes. They could have just strangled him with a belt.
Yes, he couldn't have fought back.
No, but again, that's what makes it feel even more like it was like they're sending a message. This feels like it is,
They don't like no snitch. I get it.
Yeah.
Again. Oh, I get it. Yeah.
We say this with nothing but a distanced reverence to the mafia. We are closing the door and tipping our hats. We've got no issue. Nope. Ain't nothing to see here. Nothing to see. It doesn't concern us. Doesn't concern us. We present the facts and then we tip our hats and close the door and say good day because it's too terrifying to push any further.
Oh, I know that Cookies talks a big game and wants in, but if she ever got in, she would be up all night in just a nervous sweat. Like she'd never sleep again.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that would be the thing that drove her to be a good crime boss, is that she was simply sleep deprived. So that would give her her edge. It would give her her edge.
It's true.
Oh my gosh. Well, listen, thank you for that update. Always appreciated. And it's wild again that, we've been doing this show long enough that it's updates are coming up.
It's actually really fun. I remember when we first started and it was like, we don't have any previously on True Crime and Cocktails. We had none of that. We had no that episode. And it's like, no, it was just a couple of goofballs just going for it.
Well, it's interesting too, because Whitey Bulger, it's an interesting case that we kind of chose at random, right? Like, it's interesting.
Oh,
that then that kind of came up. So
because he came up briefly in, I want to say, the Gardner Museum heist episode.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, I could do a mob boss episode. But then I was like, I've heard he's done terrible things. I'm going to need some time before I get there. And then I just went for it. And it would be different if I saw that now. I was like, well, now we do the episode. But it's the fact that we just did it months ago.
Yeah.
That's the fascinating thing for me time-wise.
Wow. Listen, synchronicities. Yeah. Well, listen, before we get into our official case for the episode, what you drinking over there?
Oh, I feel a little basic today. I'm doing a water and a Slurpee.
Well, don't worry,
the caffeine.
I'm really bringing up the rear for you here. I got a cup of water.
Of course.
I say cup because it's not in a glass; it's in a cup. Haven't drank any water today. Realize that I've been caffeinating all day. What's this? Oh, it's a McDonald's cup filled with a Diet Coke. This is not the Diet Coke that came in here. I refilled that because I only had warm cans. This is the life we live. And then this is
by we, you mean?
Oh, the royal we. Me and the dogs. And Sharky.
I think we're leaning more. You and Ma. You and your mom and your waxy cups.
Oh my God, it happens.
Slowly over time. Shout
Yeah.
out, Laurel.
Shout out to Mother Laurel.
Gosh, I
And
hope she's drinking out of a waxy cup right now.
I guarantee she is.
Yeah.
I guarantee it.
Yeah. She likes the weight of them.
You know what it is for me is I like a straw, and I had the cup on hand. This cup
Yeah.
was from today.
Of course.
And I will get rid of it at the end of today. That's the difference between her and I. I'm not reusing them.
There
yet,
it is.
But when that happens, I'm 6 months from that. Let's get real. And then I got a glass of wine. I got one of the lighter Matuas, which I like because it's lower alcohol. It's a lower alcohol percentage. And so then I can drink more. She's doing great, folks. She's doing great. But listen, let's get into the episode. This episode, we're talking about Brian Shaffer. This, of course, is the July patrons poll pick. If you'd like to learn more about our Patreon, go over to patreon.com/True Crime and Cocktails. There is a monthly poll that you can vote in for one of the episodes we cover on this feed of the show, which is what we're about to do right now. So get into it. Here we go. A little bit of backstory if you're not familiar with the Brian Shaffer case. Brian Shaffer was a 27-year-old med student at Ohio State University. In March 2006, Brian went out with friends to celebrate the beginning of spring break. But at the end of the night, Brian was nowhere to be found. When police checked security cameras at the bar, Brian was never seen leaving the building. Brian has not been seen or heard from since. So what happened to Brian Shaffer? Did he purposely avoid cameras and run off to start a new life? Did he have an accident at a nearby construction site? Or did Brian run into someone who made sure that his body would never be found? Christy Oxborrow investigates.
Couldn't be happier that that's just become a thing.
Yep.
Also, you'll notice this is so similar to the Rennie Joe's episode that we did not long ago, which I believe was the patrons poll before this.
Yes, that's
so it's
right.
Just, what are the odds that they are both like two men in their 20s who go missing during spring break?
Without a trace.
Yeah. So that episode, I focused like hard on the spring break part. This time, I did not focus on the spring break. So don't think I'm rehashing stuff. That's not how this works. So
I would never think that of you.
All new all the time. That's what we're doing over here. So as always, off the top, disclaimer. This episode will contain mentions of suicide, sexual assault, alcohol, and substance abuse. So trigger warning for those who need it. Brian Randall Shaffer was born February 25th, 1979 in Pickerington, Ohio, to Randy and Renee Shaffer. He was the oldest of two sons, the youngest being Derek Allen, who was born around 1981 or 1982. Not much is known about Brian's youth, but he graduated from high school in 1997 and went to Ohio State University, where he graduated in 2003 with a bachelor's degree in microbiology. Brian then started a graduate program at Ohio State University College of Medicine in 2004. While working towards becoming a doctor, Brian's friends and family knew that his true passion was music. Perhaps it's something he got from his father, Randy, who got a Bachelor of Arts degree in music education from Capital University. Brian told friends that his dream was to work as a doctor until he was able to get a band together and put out an album in the style of Jimmy Buffett. Brian was also a huge fan of the band Pearl Jam and even had a tattoo on his right bicep of the logo from the cover of the band's debut single, Alive, which I will post photos of course, on our socials. So in the fall of 2005, Brian met Alexis Wagner, who was also a second-year med student. The two quickly fell in love and had a trip to Miami planned for April 3rd, 2006. Friends believed that Brian was potentially going to propose on the trip. However, I could not find any confirmation of any ring being purchased prior to his disappearance or Brian outright telling somebody that this was the plan, so I can't corroborate that. Friday, March 31st, 2006, was the last day of classes prior to spring break. Brian and his father, Randy, had dinner at an Outback Steakhouse. Randy noted that Brian seemed tired from a week of midterms. Brian's brother Derek was invited along, but Derek had plans to go to the Funny Bone Comedy Club with his girlfriend Maureen. Brian invited Derek and Maureen to join him for a drink at the Ugly Tuna Saloona, which might be my favorite name of a bar I've ever heard. But Derek said the show ran late and they were both too tired for a bar trip, so they went home. Derek said that this decision has haunted him ever since, which is incredibly heartbreaking. Around 9:30 p.m., Brian meets up with his close friend, Will Florence, at the Ugly Tuna. Will somehow went by the name Clint. I don't know if it was a middle name or just a choice, but for the sake of clarity, I'm just going to keep referring to him as Clint for the rest of this. We can forget the rest of it. It just makes sense this way. So, Brian and Clint met up at the Ugly Tuna with the plan to do some bar hopping, or essentially to do a two-man pub crawl around the Arena District. The Ugly Tuna Saloona was located on a second floor of a building at 1546 North High Street in Columbus, Ohio. The main doors of the bar, which were both the entrance and the exit, were located at the top of an escalator. At 9:56 p.m., Brian called his girlfriend Alexis. He confirmed their plans to travel to Miami on Monday morning. This was Friday night. A trip that had been a gift from Brian's mother, Renee. The couple chatted briefly before saying, "I love you," and hanging up. Brian and Clint made their way south and stopped in at 6 other bars, including Lucky's Stout House, Brewdog, Oddfellows Liquor Bar, Local Bar, Short North, and Brothers Bar and Grill. The distance between the Ugly Tuna and Brothers Bar is 1.6 miles or 2.6 kilometers, which would take just over 30 minutes to walk. Of course, it took them longer because they stopped in multiple places along the way. Clint later said that they had 1 shot of hard liquor at each bar. While at Short North Tavern at 674 North High Street, they met with Clint's friend Meredith Reed, who drove them back to the Ugly Tuna for a final round. At 1:15 a.m., Brian, Clint, and Meredith were seen riding the escalator up to the Ugly Tuna. Once in the bar, they joined a group of Clint's friends. At 1:55 a.m., Brian was seen on security cameras outside of the bar talking to 2 women who were later identified as Amber Ruick and Brighton Zatko. Clint knew these women from Ohio State. Brian and Brighton were briefly alone. She later said he was flirtatious and had even kissed her neck briefly. Again, this is Brighton's words.
Yep.
She says she put her phone number into Brian's phone. Brian then kind of appears to say goodbye to her and then turns towards the bar and walks out of frame and disappears. Brighton said she went into the bar, she used the bathroom, and when she came out, Brian was gone. Clint stated he saw Brian when he returned to the bar after speaking with the girls, and that Brian told Clint he was going near the stage area before Clint lost track of him. Around 2 a.m., the bar was closing, so Clint and Meredith decided they were going to get ready to leave, but Brian was nowhere to be found. They both called his cell phone, but got no answer. They checked the bathrooms, still no sign of him, so they waited outside. After a while, they assumed maybe Brian had walked home, since his apartment was on King Avenue, which was less than a mile from the bar. Both Clint and Meredith claimed it was normal for Brian to wander off during a night out, so eventually they left without him. The weird thing is, Brian was not seen leaving the bar by either eyewitnesses or by the security cameras outside the main entrance near the escalators. Police examined the surveillance video and concluded, quote, "Everyone who entered the bar that night was accounted for, everyone except Brian." There was an emergency exit on the main floor, but I assume an alarm would sound if it was open. I could be wrong, but also it was on the main floor and there was no way Brian could have got to it without taking the escalators past the security cameras. There was also a freight elevator that led to a back entrance that was only used by staff. Investigators said at the time the back entrance led to, quote, an extensive construction site, which would have been confusing for Brian to navigate when inebriated. The back door area did not have any cameras, but there were cameras at the construction site, but there was no sign that Brian went through there that night. There was also security cameras at 3 other bars in the area, Mad Mex, Lucky's Stout House, and Sloppy Donkey. Brian was not seen in any of those photos either, or video rather, so he never walked past those, which would have been odd. There was a balcony on the Ugly Tuna, and in the grand scheme of anything is possible, maybe Brian jumped off the balcony and ended up on the street below. Is it extreme? Yes. I assume if it had happened, there would have been witnesses. I have nothing to base that on. I just think if someone jumped from a balcony when a bar was closing, that at least multiple people would have noticed that. At 2 p.m. the following day, Alexis returns from an out-of-town trip and goes to Brian's apartment. His car is in the parking lot, but Brian is nowhere to be found. Nothing in the apartment appeared to have been disturbed, and even the bed was still made. Alexis remains at the apartment over the weekend in the hopes that Brian will return. Worried about Brian's whereabouts, Alexis calls Brian's father, Randy, to say that Brian seems to be missing. Randy calls Derek and asks him to check Brian's apartment. Family just kind of thought that Brian was sleeping off a drunken night at a friend's house over the weekend. Family and friends, including Clint and Meredith, called Brian's cell phone hundreds of times over the weekend, never got an answer. Alexis waited at the airport on Monday morning, but when Brian didn't show for their flight, Randy ended up filing a missing persons report with the Columbus Police Department. Police searched the Ugly Tuna and its security camera footage. They noticed Brian entering the bar at 1:15 a.m. and the moment at 1:55 when he entered for a second time. There has never been mention of him being seen on camera between their leaving the bar. I just assume it exists.
Right.
It would have to, but it's weird that they've never mentioned, because how did he get out the first time to be able to be seen coming back in?
That is the exact question I had written down.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, that's weird. And it's weird to me that nobody else is like, well, obviously he was seen at that time too.
Because you're saying that, just for quick clarification, at 1:55, that was when he was outside the bar where he was allegedly flirting with this woman.
Yes.
So you're saying he was seen re-entering the bar on camera at that time?
Yeah.
Okay.
But at no point between 1:15 and 1:55 has anyone ever said he was seen at this time leaving the bar.
And see, that's interesting, because then that pokes holes in, are the cameras infallible?
Oh, yeah.
Is it possible that they may have missed something somehow? Anyway.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Oh,
Okay.
I agree. It's something that will bug me till the end of time.
Yeah.
But, you know.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So police went through all of the footage from surrounding bars as well as the nearby construction site. Brian wasn't seen on any of the footage. Brian's car was found untouched in the parking lot near his apartment. Police searched Brian's apartment. They found no items missing, no sign of a struggle. So it's assumed that Brian did not return home after his night out. There was also no activity on his bank account, and according to his cell phone records, no calls were made from his phone. They searched the surrounding area with sniffer dogs, but got nothing. On April 10th, Crime Stoppers offered a $2,000 reward, and Ohio State's College of Medicine offered an additional $5,000. Police then received a tip that someone claims they saw Brian at a convenience store, but after reviewing the security footage, police were able to determine the man they had seen was not, in fact, Brian. A month later, on May 11th, around 2 a.m., authorities say someone kicked in the door on Brian's apartment. Alexis was called to see if anything was missing. Turns out the TV and a couple of DVDs. And that was it. The culprits also kicked in the door of a neighboring apartment, so the police believe the incident wasn't related to Brian's disappearance, which is possible. It's also possible it was related, and they were like, we'll kick in a second door, and then the cops will think it wasn't related. But part of me is like, well, what DVDs? Like, why TV and DVD? Like, what?
Who's taking DVDs in one of those moments? If it's like, take the TV, that's a high value item, but DVDs.
Sure. Well, I mean, this was 2006.
Okay.
So that would have been, yeah. Like, it's just such a weird thing. Like, you get in, you see the TV, and you're like, let's go. And then you're like, oh shit, dude's got speed.
Yeah. Well,
listen,
I know that would be enticing for some of us, but yeah,
speed
I don't know.
Overboard. Let's go. Like, this is why I'm like, it just doesn't make sense.
He would have also had a computer there for sure. He would have had a laptop, unless his girlfriend took it out of there. But you know what I mean? Like, I just feel like,
yeah,
it's interesting.
One, also, I assume a guitar because he was a musician.
And these are the things that you would assume. Did they say what was stolen from the other apartment?
No.
Or what? Well,
they didn't say if anything was stolen. They just said the door was kicked in. And then they didn't say anything else. So they were like, see, the door was kicked in, so it was something else.
Interesting.
Poking holes like we do.
We do.
So Brian's father, Randy, consulted a psychic because he got to a point of desperation. The psychic told him Brian's body was dumped into a body of water. So Randy and his son Derek searched rivers in the area, including the Scioto River, which branches off into the Olentangy River, which goes north through the Ohio State University area. It's approximately 1 mile from Brian's apartment, but no sign of Brian was ever found. Police interviewed numerous people, starting with Clint and Meredith. About a month later, Meredith took a polygraph test. She passed. Clint was asked to take a polygraph test. He refused.
What?
He got a lawyer and deferred any questions from any reporter to his lawyer. His lawyer believes that Brian is alive. In September 2008, Clint's lawyer said, quote, if Brian is alive, which is what I'm led to believe after speaking with the detective involved, then it is Brian and not Clint who is causing his family pain and hardship. Brian should come forward and end this.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I have read a claim that Brian and Clint got into an argument on the night that Brian went missing. I, of course, have not been able to corroborate that because no multiple witnesses have come forward or anything like that. And let's face it, Clint is not cooperating. So we don't know. Brian's brother Derek has said that Clint spoke negatively about Brian after his disappearance. He did not elaborate on what specifically was said. Along with helping with searches for Brian, his girlfriend Alexis handed out missing persons flyers. She called Brian's cell phone every single night. It always went straight to voicemail. But in September 2006, 6 months after Brian went missing, Alexis called his phone and it rang 3 times before going to voicemail. Alexis said, quote, it scared the crap out of me. I had no idea what I would say if a person answered it. Alexis immediately contacted the Columbus Police Department, who were able to determine that Brian's phone pinged a tower in Hilliard, a suburb about 14 miles or 23 kilometers northwest of where Brian disappeared. The phone company said it's possible that it was some sort of a glitch. As of September 2022, Brian's cell phone has never been recovered, and Brian Shaffer has not been seen or heard from since. He was just 27 years old at the time of his disappearance. He was described as a Caucasian male, 6'2", 160 pounds, with brown hair and hazel eyes. His left iris has a small black speck, and Brian was last seen wearing a white long sleeve shirt layered with an olive green short sleeve polo shirt and dark blue jeans. Brian was described as charming, incredibly smart, and outgoing. He also has a tattoo on his right bicep of the stickman from the cover of Pearl Jam's Alive. During a Pearl Jam concert in Cincinnati in 2006, frontman Eddie Vedder asked for the audience's help to find Brian. Sadly, it was a concert that Brian had planned to attend prior to his disappearance. In May 2010, when Pearl Jam played a show in Columbus, Eddie Vedder dedicated the song Come Back to Brian Shaffer, saying, quote, "Wherever you are, we're still thinking about you."
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I have so many thoughts already, and I know we're not even through all of it yet, but I also you'll love this, and I'll get into it more later, but I wrote down some questions. She answered them, folks. You've already answered them. So there you go. And I will get into what the questions were, what the answers were, what my opinions are based on those things.
Yeah.
When we come back. Well, later in the show, but we're going to take a break right now is my point. So take a break, hit the can, grab another drink, and we'll be right back with more on this Brian Shaffer episode of True Crime and Cocktails. All right. Clap 2. 1, 2, 3. Welcome back to this episode of True Crime and Cocktails. We're, of course, discussing the case of Brian Shaffer. And I have 2 cats that just got fed and are really got some piss and vinegar energy in them. A friend of the podcast, Leslie Seiler's cat, Lily, is here at the moment. And she and Sharky took this exact moment right now to just start frolicking in some paper. So if you hear it, and you hear me doing any sort of snaps or claps or that's what's going on my end.
Oh, I think that I think that's my favorite is like the don't make me have to get angry enough. I use actual words.
Yep.
Because the amount of times, like especially if I'm on a call, child or pet, they always get the bop, 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 bop. Like it would be easier and quicker and to the point for me to go, can you not? But just once I get to can you not, that's
the box with the paper. It's the box that the fan came in today, and it's been sitting there with this paper for a few hours, and they've not touched it once. But this exact moment, it was the exact moment I said welcome back. That's when it was like, now we play. So
because they don't know where that box has been. Some old man may have brought it.
Listen. We're gonna have to get back into that anyway. So listen, where we left off, Christy gave us the rundown of the Brian Shaffer case. I am transfixed by this. I'm already concocting my own theories, but I know that you have ones that we need to cover. So let's get into it.
Yes. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I believe there are 4 like main theories, overarching theories that we could say in the grand scheme of no stone unturned.
Right.
Theory 1, I make it first so we get it out of the way because I don't think it's likely, but it's the possibility of suicide. Some have suggested that Brian Shaffer left the bar undetected with the plan to take his own life. Why? Well, yes, I'm sure medical school is incredibly stressful, but on top of that, his family had recently gone through a tragedy. On March 6th, 2006, just 3 weeks before Brian went missing, his mother, Renee, died from a rare form of cancer.
Interesting.
Now, her death was very sudden. And afterwards, Brian posted on his MySpace, because again, we're talking 2006, quote, "My mom was the greatest, most wonderful person in the world." Renee was described as a dedicated nurse who put her heart and soul into her profession. She was the one who inspired Brian to go to medical school. Friends say that while Brian appeared to be handling it well, it was obvious that his mother's death was difficult for him. Allegedly, Brian was so distraught on the day of the funeral, he showed up an hour late. So is it possible that his grief overwhelmed him and that Brian decided to take his own life? In the grand scheme of anything's possible, sure. I think it's unlikely. I'm convinced if he had, his body would have been found fairly soon after. And again, like we always say, you don't know what someone's truly going through, so we can't 100% rule it out. But I just don't buy it as a genuine thing that I think happened.
Well, listen, I know I would normally save this till the end, but I do feel like
Yeah.
he had the future plans with his girlfriend that he had confirmed that night with her over the
Yep.
phone. You know, um, I agree with you in the grand scheme of anything being possible. Absolutely possible. We also know, again, people fight silent battles that no one else knows about, and that is a truth. But it also just feels like after a night of heavy drinking, making that plan. I mean, some could argue that it's like maybe he, after that night of heavy drinking, he made that choice in an altered state. But I don't know statistically what the numbers are on that. I feel like
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't again, and I won't speak to it either way because I don't know, but we know that this man was definitely intoxicated.
Yes.
So it also feels like if you are intoxicated and you made the plan to take your own life, it does feel unlikely to me that the body would not have been found.
I agree. I
Yeah.
think I could see it being like he gets on that balcony and is like, I'm just going to jump right here. And
Totally.
he would have hurt himself, but that's as far as it would have gone based on how far up he was. But then again, he would have been found.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that it's
Anyway.
just, this just never stops being confusing. So I get why the people chose it.
Of course.
So theory number 2, the idea that Brian disappeared on purpose and started a new life somewhere else. Now, at one point, police suggested that Brian changed his clothes while he was in the bar and then purposely avoided all security cameras to sneak out and start a new life somewhere else. At the time, Brian would have only needed photo ID to catch a flight, and as far as we know, he had his wallet on him when he was last seen. However, I need to believe that police checked flight manifests, and if they had found his name, they would have announced it publicly. And as stated in the first theory, Brian was likely under a lot of stress due to school and the death of his mother. So maybe he did want to get away from it all, but to just up and leave out of nowhere, I don't buy it. First, if he did change his clothes, where did he get the clothes? He can't have changed with someone else at the bar because the police spent hours going through the camera footage and they said every person who entered was seen leaving except for Brian. So if he changed clothes, they wouldn't have known. There would have been one guy that's like, we didn't see that guy. Guy with the red shirt came in, we didn't see him leave. So if he had changed clothes with Brian, for example. So it's like, that doesn't make sense. I mean, I guess someone at the bar could have, like a bar employee could have given him clothes, but why? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. To your point, he had talked with his girlfriend just hours before. He was planning on meeting her at the airport Monday morning for their trip to Miami. So it feels weird that in a drunken state that he could pull off the, like, I'm going to get some clothes, change them, and leave all my possessions behind and never speak to my family again.
And pull it off. That's the other thing. Like,
yeah.
And was he carrying, you may not know the answer to this, but also, like, was he carrying a bag? Like, did he have a backpack?
Nope.
So the only way he could have changed clothes is that he got clothes from someone or somewhere.
Yes.
That's a bit out there. Don't you think it's a little bit out there?
It's a reach to be like, well, that's the reason we couldn't see him on camera, because he changed clothes. And it's like, he's not a ninja.
Well, then
he's not a spy.
But then count the people going in and count the people coming out. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
But this is making me, I mean, listen, I know I'm getting ahead of myself. I always save my comments till the end, but I just find that, like, because the police detectives, I'll say very quickly.
Yes.
They usually take the same tone that I will take at times, which is the simplest explanation is usually true. And to say he probably changed clothes and that's why we didn't see him leaving feels like a bit of a leap. That's not a simple answer.
No.
A simple answer is the camera didn't catch him somehow. A simple answer is he went out another door. A simple answer is not he changed clothes. But again, you see what I'm saying? Like, it's like, count the people going in and then account for all of them coming out. And if you have a deficit of one person, because if he changed clothes, he should still be, then you should be finding.
You should be like,
like,
that's weird. We never saw this person enter. Yes.
Exactly.
It doesn't make any sense. But okay, say if he got clothes from an employee, I need to believe the employee would, like, once he went missing, an employee would have come to the police and been like, shit, I did give him a shirt. Even if it's a case of he spilt a drink on himself or someone spilt on him,
right,
and we gave him one of our free t-shirts or whatever. Like, I feel like someone would have come forward by now to be like, oh, he was in this outfit when I saw him.
The only other possibility I could possibly see, but again, to me, this is a stretch, is that he was wandering around and he somehow got into a staff room, a staff only area.
Sure.
And there was t-shirts there, or he went into someone's locker and he put on a coat that wasn't his or clothes that wasn't his. But to that, I say, how and why? I mean, again, then is there no cameras within the bar? Wouldn't they have had footage of that somehow? I don't have the answer to that, but I don't know. That one, I love that. I didn't think I was going to be more aghast than the first theory, and then you blew my mind. So that just feels, again, like I'm like, what? And by the way, if it was just a theory that was out there, I wouldn't be having this reaction. But the police,
it's the police.
Like, this is what that I'm just like, come on.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, Clint claimed that Brian went near the stage area when he last saw him. So was there a band that night? Did he go out the back exit with a band and just go with them somewhere? And maybe he was seen on camera and they were just like, oh, that's a roadie or something. And so they didn't think anything of it. I don't know. I think that's a possibility.
He could have put on a band shirt. I will give them that.
Sure.
If he was talking to the band and they gave him a shirt, you and I have been in that position before, where if you're talking to a band after a show, they'll give you a shirt.
Yes.
Potentially.
Well, I mean, they tried to get us in a van.
Well,
we didn't go
in that van. We did. I remember going in that. Yeah, we did.
I don't remember going.
Don't worry about it.
Blocked it out.
Yeah, we got out very quickly. Very quickly, we were like, this is a mistake. Anyway, but my point is like, that I could see.
Sure.
That I could see. But then where would his shirt have gone?
Oh, yeah. There's just.
Because he was wearing layers, right?
Yes, I assume he just would have put it over top.
But then a third layer?
Oh, yeah, that's too much. But even then, you'd still see the sleeves and you'd notice something. But again, also, I could not verify if there was a band.
Well, that's interesting.
Because I'm like, was there a band? Why else would he want to go to the stage area?
Also, are we trusting Clint?
Oh, we're not.
But listen, again, we're getting ahead of ourselves. But again, I just feel like it's like this one has got me. I mean, listen, I'm I don't want to say I'm jazzed because I feel bad about the state of this person being missing, / something bad of it having happened to him. But I just am I'm on fire. I feel electric.
Alive. Yes. Oh, I like that. Oh, I like when you're electric.
Yeah.
In 2016, Alexis, his girlfriend, claimed that a week after his mother's death, Brian suggested that the two of them just go away somewhere. And then a few nights before his disappearance, Brian told her to find someone else because he was struggling with his mother's death and didn't want her to have to, deal with that. But I find it very interesting that before that it was, oh, I think he was going to propose. And then years later, it's like, oh, he'd actually told me to find someone else. Those are also two different stories.
Also, like, that's tough too, because people say a lot of things when they're grieving. Like grief is a real bastard, and I feel like it's a little unfair to try and suggest that something that someone said in the throes of grieving would be then like, well, that proves that that's true. Do you know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah. And
saying we should just go away somewhere, that could be like, let's go on a vacation, which by the way, then they were, or they were planning. So that one holds no water for me. And saying you should just find someone else because I'm so in the thick of this, like, to me, that doesn't raise an alarm bell to me. That's someone who's like, I feel completely despondent. This huge loss has happened. I don't know how to get over it.
Sure.
That doesn't say to me like, yes, that for sure mean, you know what I mean? Like, it's like,
Yes. Oh, yeah, I get it.
mm,
Yeah. And I'm going to bring up his MySpace page again, but
please.
people have suggested, because of one of his MySpace posts, that this was suggesting that he would walk out of his life. He had said he was talking about wanting to be in a band. And then he said, quote, "I want to own an island someday, or at least a beach, so I can listen to Buffett all day and drink margaritas with my senorita." And look, I get it. But how many times have we ever been like, oh, you know what? I'd love to just sell it all and move somewhere. Like, just because you say it out loud doesn't mean you did it.
How many times have I said I want to give it all up and move into the middle of nowhere and live in moo-moos with about 25 small dogs? I say that, I would say weekly, at least weekly. Haven't done it.
Because you've promised me farmers markets with fresh pie.
That is it. That's my fantasy life.
Yeah.
Again, that's wild to me. I want to own an island or a beach so I can sit and have drinks and listen to music. Like, I would think if you polled 100 people and asked them, like, what's an ultimate dream life for you? I think that a very large percentage would be like living on a beach where I can drink and listen to music. Like, that's not.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, 100%. Like, the amount of times while I was on my honeymoon that my husband and I would just be like, well, like, we're not going back, right?
Yeah.
Because we were like tropical, we were loving it. And then it just became the bit of the whole time we were gone that we were like, so we're just like gonna move here, right? And then every day, like, you'd add on a layer where then it would be like, okay, so we fly home, we get the kid, we bring him back.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, how would our vinyl stand up to this heat? And like, just like every day you add like a new, like, oh, so how much would we sell? Would we get a storage unit? And it's just like beach talk. Like, we obviously did not stay there, which is a travesty, but still.
But yes, again, there's a difference between I'd like to live on an island and I want to disappear. My life is meaningless. I don't feel seen by anybody, so I would like to be seen by no one. I have a great sadness inside me. There's a lot of things that could be posted that I could say, yeah, that's absolutely a factor. But to me, like, my dream is to live on an island. Like, my God, that is so benign. I can't.
Oh, 100%. I mean, he has not used any bank accounts since he went missing. My thought was, is it possible, if there was a band that night, because he was a musician and was with like-minded people, did he end up getting in a van with them and being like, yeah, I'll go with you to your next gig in another state? Because he was drunk, and every time you're drunk, that just any plan seems like the greatest plan. And then he ended up in a city he wasn't sure of. Sure, that's possible. But again, he would have woken up the next day and been like, oh shit, and then called someone he knows and is like, you'll never guess what I've done. And then they get him money, or he uses his own money, or they go get him, or whatever, and he goes home. But
I guess the only other possibility is, did he get into a van with this alleged band we can't even prove is there, and then something happened and his body was somewhere where people have not looked for it because it's so far away? But then to that, it's like, why is his phone pinging where it's pinging
months later?
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. This never stops with questions.
Never stops.
And look, I know the whole idea of just up and walk out of your life and to be like, I'm over this, and just start new somewhere else feels very, very far-fetched, especially in this case. But I have some examples where it actually legit happened. Just to be like, hey, these people really did. They all did it for different reasons, which, who knows, maybe any of these are the reasons, but some of these are very fascinating to me. So first is William Horatio Bates, who was born December 23rd, 1860. He graduated from Cornell University in 1881 with a bachelor's degree in agriculture, then attended Columbia Medical School, where he graduated with his medical degree in 1885 before becoming an ophthalmologist.
Mm.
William was married 4 times over the course of his life, although most records, including his own obituary, claim he was only married 3 times. And you know how much I hate conflicting information, even if reading through the obituary. I'm not going to read it for you. I'll give you all the highlights out of it. But even reading that alone, it's like, well, he married this woman at this point, and then he was a widower twice, and then he did this with this wife. And it's like, but wait, then that counts as 4 wives because there was no wife at this point. So even his obituary is lying and not counting this poor woman as his wife. But
right.
So first time he was married was 1883. He married a woman named Edith Kitchell. They had a son, Charles Halsey Bates, at some point before Edith's death in 1886. Now, between 1886 and 1891, William was an instructor in ophthalmology at New York Postgraduate Hospital and Medical School. At this point, William is wealthy. He's a well-respected doctor. And at some point prior to 1902, he married for a second time. This time to a woman named Ada Seaman, who sadly gets left off of most of his biographies. I don't know why, but this one is weird, and it's just inconsistencies everywhere. So on August 30th, 1902, William writes a letter to his wife, Ada, who is visiting her mother in Newport at the time. The letter said, quote, "My dear wife, I am called out of town to some major operations. He promises me, or this particular doctor promises me a bonanza. Too bad to miss the horse show. I'm glad to get so much money for us all. I am in such a flurry. Do not worry. I will write details later. Yours lovingly, Willie." Couldn't have been happier that he chose Willie. But also, again, he was a very, very wealthy man at this point. So he was excited about getting money. Like, that felt weird, especially for a man who turns out wasn't using the money he had. But he said he'd write details later. He did not. In fact, he just outright didn't come home. Ada grew concerned, and since William was a prominent Mason, Ada enlisted the local Masonic Society to help circulate William's photo around the world. 6 weeks later, Ada received a letter from the UK claiming that a man fitting William's description had been admitted to the Charing Cross Hospital in London and had since started working there as a medical assistant. Ada goes to London. She finds the man was in fact William. He was haggard and thin, deeply sunken eyes. It looked like he had gone weeks without food, which is odd because he had access to a bank account in London, which was so large, it was said he could have lived in luxury in London for years, but he hadn't touched it. The other thing about William was he was in an exhausted, nervous state with no recollection of recent events. In fact, William didn't even recognize his own wife. He told Ada, "I don't know why you bother, madam. We're strangers." Ada managed to get William to the Savoy Hotel where she planned to stay before their journey back home. 2 days later, William disappeared again. Ada continued to search for William until her own death in 1907.
Whoa.
Yeah. So cut to 1910, a man named Dr. Kelly, who was a former colleague of William's, happened to be traveling through Grand Forks, North Dakota, when he found William working in a private practice. Dr. Kelly said, quote, it was as if he had a chunk of his mind removed, like a slice of watermelon chopped away and eaten by an invisible monster. Somehow, even though he had no idea who Dr. Kelly was, William went with Dr. Kelly, returned to New York, and they opened a practice together. From 1911 to 1922, William was an attending physician at the Harlem Hospital. At some point, he married a third time to Margaret Crawford. They had daughter named Milo, and a son named William. Margaret died in 1927, and then August 1928, William married Emily Learman, who was his assistant since 1911. They remained married until William's death in July 1931. But for the rest of his life, William claimed to never regain the memory of his life with Ada. At the time of his first disappearance, William was at the height of his career. For example, he discovered a substance that later became adrenaline.
Wow.
Yeah, so he was super impressive. So, like, was it a midlife crisis that made him run? Some sort of amnesia? After he returned to the United States, William went from a highly respected doctor to kind of a bit of a quack. In 1917, he debuted a new and unusual theory for eye care that would come to be known as the Bates method. He published numerous books on his theory that he believed eyesight could be corrected with simple mental relaxation. And while that seems great in theory, one of the methods he recommended for fixing your less than perfect eyesight was just to stare for several minutes directly into the sun.
Oh no.
Yeah. Which, I mean, don't.
No.
No. His most well-known book was Perfect Sight Without Glasses, which he published in 1920. One final thing about William's case that just adds to the confusion. In August 1928, around the time that William married for the last time, his son Charles went missing. I couldn't find anything about Charles except for the fact that William purposely left him out of his will. So
wow.
I don't know how to handle most of that, but to sum that up, basically, he goes missing from New York. He's gone for 6 weeks, turns up in a hospital in London, goes missing again for 9 years, and the entire time claims to have no memory of his previous life. To the point where that poor wife that he claims to not remember doesn't get mentioned in most of his biographies. Which is just, I don't even know. I don't even know.
Well, listen, you want to know where my brain goes immediately?
He hated his wife.
No.
Oh.
You're like, why was he so excited about the money that he was making? He had so much money. And I'm like, how much money was it? Because if somebody's very wealthy, they value money.
True.
And if it's enough money, maybe they are really excited about it. So my question is, who is this doctor that was having him come to do some surgeries or whatever, where he was going to be making so much money that he talked about it? What did that doctor do to him?
Oh, great point.
That's where I immediately went.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible.
If his brain was never the same again.
Oh, yeah.
He was lured with the promise of all this money because he was a wonderful doctor, had a great brain.
Of course.
Did this doctor do some sort of experiment or something or whatever? And
again, we trust no one. So that makes complete sense to me.
Yep.
Oh, well, again, I've got another one for you. And this one, wildly different than the other. So
let's go.
It's the fact that I found multiple that I was like, and they're all different. Well, I guess we're doing them all then, just for examples to give an idea that this legit is a thing that could happen. So the next story is Richard Hoagland, who was married to his wife, Linda, for 11 years. They had 2 sons, 6-year-old Douglas and 9-year-old Matthew. They lived in a large 5-bedroom house in the Fishers area of Indiana. They had a speedboat that was docked in Geist Reservoir. They took exotic vacations. Overall, they lived what most described as a picture-perfect life. On February 10th, 1993, Richard called his wife Linda at work around 4:45 p.m. to say he would be gone before she got home. Linda picked up their youngest son from daycare, and when she arrived home, she found their 3rd grader home alone. Richard called again at 5:40 p.m. and said things such as, quote, "I feel you'd be better off without me. I don't want to go to jail. I'm never coming back."
Whoa.
Richard didn't take his passport or any substantial amount of cash. He left behind all of his clothing, including a jacket. Like, he didn't even take a jacket. He left everything. A few days later, police found Richard's car at the Indianapolis International Airport, but Richard's name was not listed on any of the departing flights. Richard called his family collect multiple times throughout February. According to Linda's phone bill, the calls originated from Venezuela and Aruba. Then months later, in the summer of 1993, both sons received a birthday card that contained $50. One card read, quote, "Maybe sometime soon we'll get to see each other. I bet I won't even know you. It has been so long. Mind your mother. Bye, Dad." It was the last time the family heard from Richard. Linda said after Richard left, the bank foreclosed on their house. Their cars were repossessed. She said she had to sell valuable items of theirs, including Richard's designer suits, just to pay their bills. A quote from Linda, quote, "He devastated us. He left us with nothing, absolutely nothing. I was very broken." After 10 years, Richard was legally declared dead in 2003. Then in July 2016, Linda received a phone call from a detective in the Pasco County Sheriff's Department in Florida. He asked Linda if she knew a man named Richard Hoagland. She said yes. The detective said, "We have him in custody." Turns out that in late 1993, Richard returned to the United States and settled in West Palm Beach, Florida. He rented a room from a commercial fisherman who had lost his adult son, Terry Szymanski, in a boating accident in 1991. While staying there, Richard found the son's death certificate and used it to get a birth certificate in the name of Terry Szymanski, which he used to get an Alabama driver's license. Richard, who was now going by Terry Szymanski, moved to Zephyr Hills, Florida, and then got a Florida driver's license under that name. He also eventually remarried, and they had a son in 1997. During this time, Richard also earned his pilot's license and bought at least one private jet. In July 2016, he was approached by police, and he told them his name was Terry Szymanski. He even produced a social security number stating as much. But when police showed him the real Terry's death certificate, Richard admitted he was in fact Richard Hoagland. Richard pleaded guilty to identity theft and served nearly 2 years in federal prison before moving back to Indiana in April 2018. A month later, a judge ordered Richard to pay $1.8 million in back child support to his first wife, Linda. However, his first family may not see the money, as Richard's assets are currently the subject of divorce proceedings because his second wife was not happy to learn some
Bet
stuff.
she wasn't.
Yep. So was it a midlife crisis that caused Richard to up and dump his entire life at the age of 40 and run off and start again? Or was he just chicken shit? Turns out, at the time of his disappearance, Richard was under investigation for fraud. So most likely he sensed trouble was coming and got out of Dodge. Like he said to his wife in one of the phone calls, "I don't want to go to jail." But for abandoning his family like that, I'm glad he went to jail anyway.
Yes.
It's just wild to me. Also, you know you're going to be in trouble, and you're like, "Nah, I'll let her deal with that. I'm out." Fuck you, Richard. I'll say it.
Oh, yeah.
And then this will be the final example I have of just up and walk out of your life. But again, for other reasons. On January 21st, 1987, in Sydney, Australia, 43-year-old Gabriel Nagy left work on his break, headed home for lunch. He called his wife, told her he was coming home for lunch, but he didn't arrive. The next day, police found Gabriel's car burnt out on the side of a road. Gabriel, nowhere to be found. Since this behavior was highly unusual for the father of two, Police launched an immediate investigation into Gabriel's whereabouts. 2 weeks later, Gabriel withdrew money from his bank account, which he used to purchase camping supplies from a store in Newcastle. Then the trail went cold and there was no sign of Gabriel. Jump ahead 23 years to 2010, when Gabriel's wife is in the process of having him declared legally dead. A police officer decides just one final check through public records, and he noticed that someone named Gabriel Nagy had a Medicare record. Police interviewed him. Gabriel had no memory whatsoever of his past. He didn't even remember large world events, like he had never heard of Operation Desert Storm. He didn't know Princess Diana or the fact that she had died, which are very global events that you'd think he would have at least heard of, but he had no recollection whatsoever. From what police can tell, at some point after calling his wife, Gabriel was attacked and hit in the head. One of Gabriel's first memories was waking up with a head injury that was bleeding profusely. Gabriel then said he remembers camping throughout Queensland area and working on farms and fishing boats. He went without housing for a while until a pastor hired him as a caretaker at the River of Life Church, a position that came with a place to stay. It is believed the head injury caused Gabriel to suffer from amnesia. I know what you're thinking. He used his bank account to buy camping supplies. He had to remember something. It has been suggested that Gabriel suffered from dissociative fugue. Now, this occurs when a person with memory loss wanders, leaving the person in an unfamiliar place with no memory of how they got there. It's usually a temporary state where the victim doesn't recognize that there are gaps in their memory until they're given evidence that prove, oh yeah, they've forgotten something. Those who are going through it will unintentionally wander or travel to a specific location. It can last for a short time. It can be over in a few hours, or it can take the person to a point where they get a new identity and they just rebuild their life, completely not remembering the life that they left behind. It's said that this fugue can happen either if the victim suffers from dissociative identity disorder or dissociative amnesia, which is caused by a severe trauma, such as sudden life changes, loss of a loved one, severe life stress, something of that nature. Is it possible that Gabriel suffered a head injury that caused him to have amnesia, which led to this and caused him to walk out of his own life? And what about Brian Shaffer? Is it possible that he suffered some sort of head injury and just simply forgot who he was? Was the stress of school and the loss of his mother enough to bring all of this on? In the case of dissociative amnesia, the memory loss is a defense mechanism that the person uses to prevent themselves from remembering painful events. So maybe Brian's brain was simply trying to protect him from the pain, and in doing so, it made him forget who he was. It seems unlikely. But if Gabriel Nagy can disappear only to be found 23 years later, maybe the same is possible for Brian Shaffer. I doubt it. But again, no stone unturned. That's where we're at. It is a condition. It happens in 1.8% of the population and is more common in females. So again, I doubt it, but I put it on the table as a maybe. Maybe he's out there living a new life with no realization that he left an entire life behind. And maybe he's out there living a new life purposely trying to forget the one that he had. Again, I did not know Brian personally. I just don't believe he purposely walked out of his life. I really don't. I'm more likely to believe he's living a life with no memory of Columbus at all. But even that, I'm not sold on as a theory. But if he did run off intentionally, prior to his disappearance, Brian had been drinking heavily, and I honestly just don't believe that an inebriated person would be able to stealthily and purposely avoid cameras. I think if he planned to run off that night, he would have packed some clothes, taken extra cash, I don't believe he intentionally just walked out of his life with nothing but the clothes on his back. I just don't. That's where I'm at with that.
Yeah.
So that's going to lead me to theory number 3.
Yeah.
Some sort of accident.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe when Brian was leaving the bar, he ended up going out the door that led to the construction site. Maybe he got stuck or seriously hurt. I'd like to believe if that was true, he would have been found soon after. Investigators searched the area and even brought in sniffer dogs, but Brian was never found. But maybe somehow his body is somewhere at that construction site. For example, on March 9th, 2022, a construction worker found a mummified body inside a wall during a renovation at the Henry J. Kaiser Convention Center in Oakland, California. The coroner used the serial number from a metal plate found in an ankle to identify the body. A DNA test was used to confirm the findings, and the remains were identified as 40-year-old Joseph Edward Mejica. His mother reported him missing in August 2020. At the time of his disappearance, Joseph was without housing and had been known to take copper and other metals from buildings. So maybe that had something to do with where he was found. Maybe he got in there and got stuck and wasn't able to get out. Investigators believe Joseph may have fallen from a roof area and remained there for a year and a half. One officer stated, quote, "We're not exactly sure. He either tried to climb down in there or he had some type of medical emergency or got trapped, but our examination showed there was no sign of foul play. He wasn't put there. There was no sign he was the victim of any crime." And this happens more often than we'd like to think about. In July 2022, construction at an upscale housing community in Palm Coast, Florida, was stopped after crews found a human femur. Since then, 90% of a human skeleton has been found at that site. Police are currently awaiting identification. County Sheriff Rick Staley said, quote, "We have 2 femurs. If we find a 3rd femur, we have a problem." And to that I say, Sheriff, I think even 1 femur's a problem.
Yeah.
I get what he's saying is like, if there's 3, we have multiple bodies, but it's like 1 body is a lot.
But even 2 could be 2 different people.
Yeah, great call. But it's just like, oh, well, as long as it's just 2, then we're fine.
God.
Oh, take a seat, Sheriff. But maybe Brian ended up being buried at the construction site. There were cameras at the site, so if he had entered the area, he likely would have been seen on the cameras. But again, we are trying to look at this from all angles. Maybe he got hurt somehow and ended up falling into the river, which was nearby, and snaked through the whole area. Using another case to show that this theory is possible, it's the case of 21-year-old Westchester University student Shane Montgomery. Shane was last seen November 26, 2014, at Kildare's Irish Pub in Westchester, Pennsylvania. According to Shane's mother, he had gone out to celebrate with some friends. They became separated. For no decent reason, around 1:45 a.m., a bouncer told Shane he needed to leave. Nearby security cameras captured Shane walking down Main Street towards a nearby parking lot, but then he disappeared. Days went by without any sign of Shane. His family put up posters. They did searches. They offered rewards. Nothing came of it. 3 weeks later, divers found a set of keys attached to a Philadelphia Eagles lanyard in the Schuylkill River near a parking lot. Shane's uncle identified the keys as belonging to Shane. Then in January 2015, 5 weeks after Shane's disappearance, his body was found submerged in that very river. An autopsy ruled his death an accident. Investigators determined that Shane must have fallen into the water. He was described as well-liked, outgoing, and a cross-country athlete who dreamed of a future career in the music industry. Shane's parents filed a wrongful death suit against the 2 bars that were known for serving their son, claiming that they served Shane alcohol even though he was visibly intoxicated. They also claimed that one of the bouncers ejected Shane for no good reason, quote, leaving the overly intoxicated and incapacitated college student alone on the streets of Philadelphia at 2 a.m. During the wrongful death trial, employees of Kildare's Irish pub admitted they didn't follow their own policies when it came to removing Shane from their pub. He wasn't causing a disturbance. The bouncer removed Shane after he fell off a bar stool. According to the State Liquor Control Board, the next move was to reunite Shane with his friends or call him a cab and offer him a non-alcoholic drink. The defense admitted that they made a mistake. After a month-long trial on March 4th, 2019, a jury found 2 bars were each 50% responsible for Shane's death, and each were required to pay $525,000 to Shane's family. So did Brian Shaffer accidentally fall into a nearby river on the night of his disappearance? The Olentangy River was just over a mile away. So maybe he managed to get out of the building and tried to head home, but got confused. His apartment was just half a mile or 850 meters from the bar, so he had no need to go near the river. But we know he'd been drinking excessively for hours, so maybe it's possible he took a wrong street and ended up further west than he wanted, and that's how he encountered the river. Or maybe he didn't go near the river at all. Maybe an accident happened and someone tried to cover it up. As an example, I present the case of 29-year-old Peyton Lane Houston. Peyton went out for drinks with a couple of co-workers at the Tin Roof Bar in Birmingham, Alabama on December 20th, 2019. Around 10:45 p.m., Peyton was seen leaving the bar with 2 unknown men. Witnesses said Peyton appeared to be going with the men willingly. At 12:15 a.m., Peyton sent one of her co-workers a text that read, "I don't know who I'm with, so if I call, please answer. I feel in trouble."
Aww.
The coworker did not see the message until 2 hours later. And that was the last time anyone heard from Peyton. 2 weeks later, on January 3rd, 2020, Peyton's body was found wrapped in sheets and buried in a shallow grave behind an abandoned house in Hueytown, Alabama. According to the autopsy, there was no physical trauma to the body of the victim that would have led to her death. Her official cause of death was morphine and methamphetamine toxicity, or simply a drug overdose. Peyton's manner of death was considered accidental. Investigators have said they found evidence that Peyton died the day after her disappearance at a house in Brighton, Alabama, 15 miles or 25 kilometers from the bar where she was last seen. According to 50-year-old Frederick Hampton, after Peyton's accidental overdose, he panicked and buried her body behind an abandoned house in Hueytown. Hampton was arrested and charged with abuse of a corpse because he buried her. In 1992, Hampton was convicted of first-degree rape and first-degree sodomy charges and sentenced to 20 years in jail. He was released March 2012.
I'm sorry. Also, I just have to very quickly say,
yeah.
And we're just believing that she took these drugs willingly. She was with people that she didn't know. She was sexually assaulted. And we're just believing that she just OD'd.
We're supposed to believe that, yes.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
In January 2022, Peyton's family filed a wrongful death suit against both Frederick Hampton, the Tin Roof Bar, as well as the city of Birmingham. But is it possible that Brian met up with some people and continued drinking and he passed out and then suddenly wasn't breathing and they panicked and hid his body? Is it possible that someone put something in Brian's drink at the Ugly Tuna, they left together, Brian became unconscious, and they panicked? If it wasn't an accident, well, that leads me to theory number 4, which is outright murder. Did Brian get into an argument with someone at the bar and they followed him outside and continued it? Could they have caught up with him and put his body somewhere at the construction site or in one of the nearby rivers? Or could it have been a serial killer? Some seem to think that Brian and Brian's potential killer was the smiley face killer. There is a theory created by 2 NYPD detectives and a university criminal justice professor. The theory alleges that a serial killer or multiple killers are responsible for the deaths of young men in Midwestern America from the late 90s to the 2010s. In most of the cases, the victims were discovered in a body of water and their deaths were attributed to accidental drownings. What made the deaths all seem connected was the fact that there was a smiley face spray painted near the location where the police believe the bodies were dumped. There are nearly 40 potential victims of this alleged serial killer, and while Brian was a similar age to most of the victims, his body has yet to be found. As with most of these alleged smiley face killer victims, there was also no sign of a smiley face anywhere in the Columbus area. And while some still believe this is a possible theory as to what happened to Brian, the FBI ruled it out as a possibility in 2008. I'm also not saying the FBI is always correct, but I also don't buy this theory. So,
yeah.
But if Brian was murdered, maybe instead of a serial killer, the suspect was just a dangerous person in the area. Or maybe the area itself isn't overly safe. I present to you a few examples of that.
Please.
On February 8th, 2017, Ohio State University student Reagan Tokes was leaving work at the end of her shift around 9:45 p.m. in downtown Columbus when she was abducted by a creep named Brian Goolsby. Goolsby robbed Reagan, forced her to drive to numerous ATMs to keep withdrawing money for him. He then sexually assaulted her and forced her to drive him to the Scioto Grove Metro Park. At the park, Goolsby forced Reagan to strip naked before forcing her to walk into a field where he shot her in the head twice.
God.
Her body was found the next morning. She was just 21 years old. Just prior to the incident, Goolsby had been released from a 6-year sentence for sexually assaulting a pregnant woman and kidnapping that woman and her child. He pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of robbery and attempted rape. I'd love to know how that works when he actually did rape her and he somehow was allowed to say yes to attempted rape. I'd like to know that.
I'm sorry, can you just repeat for me too, when was he released in relationship to this crime?
He was released, it was a 6-year sentence. I might not have got there yet. He was released just prior to when all of this went down.
Just prior, okay.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Because after his release from this 6-year sentence, he violated his probation and committed 6 robberies before being arrested for Reagan's murder. All 6 robberies occurred between January 24th and February 7th, and included an incident where he pistol whipped a woman before taking her money. It turns out neither his parole officer nor the housing program where he was staying were bothering to monitor him in any way.
Wow.
And from what I can tell, no one was ever reprimanded for that, even though their negligence cost a woman her life.
Jesus.
Goolsby was tried on 1 count of aggravated murder, 1 count kidnapping, 1 count rape, 7 counts aggravated robbery, 2 counts tampering with evidence, and 1 weapons charge. He was convicted on all of them and sentenced to life in prison. And yes, Goolsby might be an exception as he was a dangerous man wandering the area looking for a victim. But what other violence has occurred in the area? That brings us to October 11th, 2020. 4 individuals tried to enter a party at the Phi Kappa Psi fraternity at Ohio State University. They were denied entry and a fight broke out. One of them started waving a gun around. He threatened people. He said he would kill anyone who touched him. 23-year-old Chase Miola stepped up to protect his friends and was fatally shot. Chase was pronounced dead at 2:17 a.m. He was a fifth-year marketing major with dreams of working on Wall Street. Chase was described as kind, energetic, and always able to make people laugh. 18-year-old Kinty Mitchell Jr. was arrested and charged with 1 count of second-degree murder and 1 count of illegal possession of a weapon. He has since pleaded not guilty, and they are currently awaiting a trial date. At the time of the incident, Mitchell was out on bond. He had previously been arrested on 3 separate burglary charges and posted a nearly $200,000 bond just 3 days before this incident. How does an 18-year-old get that kind of money? I have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Chase's death led to the formation of the Ohio State Safety Task Force, which made more than a dozen new safety and security recommendations, such as increasing university police presence and expanding surveillance camera coverage off campus. The task force also recommended working with community organizations to increase the security in the university district neighborhood. A lot of their recommendations involved the off-campus neighborhoods, which would be where Brian Shaffer lived. About 18,000 Ohio State students live in that area during the school year. Since the shooting occurred just half a mile, or 850 meters from the Ugly Tuna, where Brian Shaffer went missing, is the incident an indicator that the neighborhood wasn't safe? Did Brian have some sort of altercation at the bar and it carried out to the street? Did he exchange words with someone who followed him out there? Maybe that's why Brian possibly took off out the back exit. Was he trying to avoid someone and they caught up with him? And again, maybe it was a case of a rough area. I have one more potential example for you. This case I left specifically for last because it is so similar to Brian's case that when you first hear it, you think it's the same thing. This is the case of Joey LaBute Jr., who was born June 16th, 1989 in Cincinnati, Ohio. When Joey was just 9, his mother passed away from cancer in 1998. Joey graduated from Lakota East High School in 2007, and he went on to attend Ohio State University. He graduated in 2011 with a degree in financial planning. Joey was known as a homebody. He made a rare appearance out on the night of March 5th, 2016. Along with his cousin Stacy Regal and her husband Kyle, Joey met up with friends at and family at Union Cafe around 9 p.m. Union Cafe was about a 5-minute walk from where Brian Shaffer went missing just 10 years prior. Union was packed, and over the course of the evening, Stacy lost sight of Joey. Around midnight, Stacy became unwell, so she called and texted Joey to let him know she was leaving, but he never responded. At 12:30 a.m., Joey was seen on security cameras leaving the bar alone. At 12:19, he texted a friend, quote, "To help, so goo 5." So I don't know if that was supposed to be good, but he hit 5 instead. The friend just kind of thought that message was positive. So they weren't concerned about it in any way. And they just kind of went, oh, okay. Then at 1:22 a.m., he texted another friend just a series of letters that don't make sense. According to the police, Joey's phone remained in the Short North area for at least 2 hours after he left the bar. When there was still no word from Joey the next day, his family started searching for him. His car was found in the parking lot where he left it the night before. Family, friends, and members of the LGBTQIA+ community passed out flyers. They conducted multiple searches. No sign of Joey. Just over 3 weeks later, on March 29th, 2016, Joey's body was found partially submerged in the Scioto River just south of downtown Columbus. That particular area had been searched multiple times over the 3-week period. Joey was just 26 at the time of his death. He was described as quiet and witty with a sarcastic sense of humor. Due to Joey's body being found in water, the autopsy listed his cause of death as undetermined. There were no signs of trauma, such as like bullet wound or stab wound. There was nothing in the toxicology report besides ethanol and caffeine. There was no water in his lungs or his stomach. Therefore, we know he was dead when he entered the water. The possibility of suicide was ruled out, and the autopsy concluded the manner of death was homicide. Joey's cell phone, wallet, and keys have never been found. As of September 2022, no arrests have been made. So did Joey have a run-in with someone from the bar? Was it just a random person or persons on the street who took advantage of Joey's inebriated condition? Could Brian Shaffer have been attacked while in the same condition? Does he disappear, or does his disappearance involve another person from that bar? Was he just in the wrong place at the wrong time? These are cases that it doesn't matter how much we talk about them, there are always going to be more questions than answers.
Yeah.
But it was just also, for me, they have a similar look, dark hair, tall. They both lost their mothers to cancer. They went out drinking and then just were seen on a security camera, and that's it. And then just no one found them. And then, I mean, obviously Joey was found 3 weeks later, but where's his phone?
Yeah.
What happened to that? I have a lot of questions. But since Brian's disappearance, because you know I like to give an update, although these updates, one's not great. Brian's family has continued to search for him and to keep hope that Brian will be found alive. Brian's father, Randy, searched tirelessly for his son. He worked with law enforcement, gave interviews, he consulted with psychics. He did everything within his power to try and find his son. Sadly, on September 14th, 2008, after a massive storm that took 5 lives, Randy was outside in his yard cleaning up when a tree branch snapped and struck him in the head. His body was found the next day. Randy was just 55 years old. Randy's obituary was posted on the Columbus Dispatch website, and numerous people left comments on the page. One comment in particular stuck out. It said, quote, "Dad, I love you. Love, Brian, U.S. Virgin Islands." And I'll say right away, that was not Brian. That was not. Like, I know I don't know him, but someone in the grand scheme of anything's possible. If he wanted to leave his life and not look back, why would he post a massive clue after he took all that trouble to disappear quietly and sneak away? Yeah. Posting a location is completely unnecessary, especially when you're saying, "Dad, love, Brian." He was a dad to 2. So there was only 2 options. So once you say Brian, we know who you're talking about. And so I'm just convinced this was a stupid prank by some lame internet troll. But my heart absolutely breaks for Derek to think he lost both of his parents and his brother all in the span of less than 3 years.
Yeah.
On a positive side, in 2009, Derek married his high school sweetheart, Maureen, and the 2 have since had a son. So that's something.
Yeah.
Alexis Wagner spent months posting hundreds of missing person flyers and searching surrounding neighborhoods and riverbanks. She called Brian's cell phone every night for almost a year. Alexis eventually found love and married a man named Eric in June 2009. They have welcomed 2 sons in 2011 and 2014, and they now live in Toledo, where Alexis is an OBGYN. The Ugly Tuna Saloona, which again is a name I do love, officially closed in May 2018 after 14 years. But then it reopened in April 2019. What I love is how little time in between. It's now known as the Ugly Tuna Saloona 2.
Oh, boy.
The fact that it's not a tuna.
Oh,
Ugly Tuna Saloona Tuna.
Thank you.
Just Ugly Saloona Tuna. I mean, with a 2, come on. Yeah. It's in a building 0.4 miles or 700 meters from its previous location. So not the exact same, but close. As for Brian himself, the most recent potential sighting of Brian Shaffer was in 2020. A tourist in Tijuana took a photo of a bearded man without housing with the belief the man might be Brian. The photo circulated around the internet, and the FBI administered facial recognition on the image and concluded that the man was not Brian Shaffer. In March 2021, investigators released an age-progressed photo of Brian of what he might look like at the age of 42. As of September 2022, Brian Shaffer would be 43 years old, and while he's been missing for over 16 years, police are not any closer to finding out the truth of what has happened. To quote Detective John Hurst, quote, "The answers that everyone wants, everyone needs, I don't know if we will ever have them." Reporting for True Crime and Cocktails, I'm Christy Oxborrow.
Well, listen.
Yeah.
We don't have the answers.
No.
But we have lots of speculations that we're going to get into after our second break. So hit the can one more time, grab one more drink, and come on back because I have lots of theories and opinions on this episode of True Crime and Cocktails. All right, final clap. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Welcome back to this True Crime and Cocktails episode. I never say it in that order. I say episode of True Crime and Cocktails. Felt weird coming out of my mouth. Doesn't matter. Look, I have lots of theories, thoughts, feelings, opinions.
I can't wait.
The very first thing I have to say, though, and you know, this is something where I've alluded to this. I mean, I think it may have even been the Rennie Joseph episode of the show, but regardless, I've alluded to this in different episodes of the show before. And the thing I just have to say off the get, out of order, is this.
Yeah.
The Joey LaBute Jr. case and this case, the one synchronicity that I will never wrap my head around for as long as I live is, quote, "Then the friend just lost sight of them." If I am out with someone, and let's just say it's someone I'm not even that close with, but I'm out with someone. If I, quote, lose sight of someone, we're at a 5-alarm fire. Like, we are at a huge, huge problem, panic. This is not just, oh, well, I don't care about gender. I don't care about anything. If we are out together, especially if it's a small group, which it is in both of these cases.
Yes.
That is something I will never, and I am not trying to be judgmental, but it is just something I will never be able to wrap my head around. And for me, and I'm not putting that on Joey's cousin, because it doesn't sound to me like there was anything untoward happening there. But what I will say is that in the case of Brian Shaffer, I don't trust this Clint friend as far as I can throw him.
Sure.
And that's where what we're getting into.
Oh, I assumed this was coming.
Of course. I mean, I have so many things to say. First of all, your name is Will, you go by Clint. It shouldn't be a red flag to me. It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Again, I tried to find out if it was like a middle name because that's all I can assume. But also, that was better for you. Like, I'm just curious about why that choice was made.
Yeah. For me, it's also that it's the two of them hanging out. So these guys are pretty close. They're close enough that they're going out on a 2-man pub crawl.
I had heard at what, not in this moment, but prior to this, at some point they had been roommates.
Okay. So there is a rapport there.
Yes.
There's a closeness there. And they've gone on a 2-man pub crawl. That's not something you typically do with somebody that you don't at least have some kind of connection with. You know what I mean? This isn't to me, I think that's very fun. I love that. I just don't think you do that with someone that you're kind of like middling with. It's like, you know, this person well enough is my point. So the question that I wrote down, you said they hit 6 bars between the Ugly Tuna and then when they turned back.
Yes.
And they did 1 shot at each of one of those bars.
Yes.
And we know, I didn't write down what time they had started that, but we know that they got back to the Ugly Tuna Saloon at 1:15 a.m.
They had just started at the Ugly Tuna at 9:56 when he called his girlfriend.
Thank you very much. So essentially just over 3 hours. So they have done 6 shots
At least.
in just over 3 hours. So we're talking at least a shot every half an hour, and there was probably a drink at the Ugly Tuna to begin with. I would expect. The first question I wrote down.
Yeah.
How big is this guy? How big is Brian Shaffer? And you answered my question, which I alluded to earlier.
Yes.
6'2" and 160 pounds.
Yeah.
This is just me stating what I believe to be a fact.
Okay.
As someone who considers herself an alcohol enthusiast, that is a slim man.
Sure.
6'2", 160 pounds. That's a slim man.
Yep.
Not a judgment. Everybody's body chemistry is different. Everybody reacts to alcohol different. I know that what I'm about to say, it may sound like I'm contradicting what I just said, but it's not. What I want to offer is that that size of a person, when you think about like frat dudes or whatever.
Yeah.
Those boys can put away alcohol. And I know you could say it's regardless of size, but that's a slim build. That's a slim build for that amount of alcohol. Not a judgment, doesn't matter. Everybody reacts differently. But the only thing I'm trying to get to is I believe that this man would be he's not loose and buzzy. He's pretty drunk by the time they get back
probably
back to that bar. Not a judgment. I'm pretty drunk all the time. It's not a judgment. Again, but you know what I'm saying? Like a 160-pound person I can speak to, and I'm not as tall as him. 6 shots in 3 hours is, I mean, you're going for it because there's nothing watering it down. Are they potentially drinking waters in between? We don't know. I doubt it. If I know anything of like bar culture here in America, meaning, something that we never do back home that I notice that people do here is they order a shot and a beer. And back home, it's like, I just don't remember anybody ever doing that, certainly in my era. Here, it's like the common thing. It's like shot and a beer, shot and a beer, shot and a beer. Am I saying they were drinking beers all of those times? I'm not, but I'm just offering that, like, to me, the level of intoxication by 115, I think, is probably moderate to up there. Like, I think we're probably at a 7 out of 10 minimum. No judgment.
Yeah.
Between 115 and 155. So we've got 40 minutes there. We see him going into the bar, and then we see him outside the bar allegedly flirting with this other woman. I am very curious about how much alcohol was drank in that amount of time. 40 minutes. Yeah. If I also know anything as an alcohol enthusiast, when you drink and you get into the pocket of drinking, then you start to speed up. Then it's like, I can do anything. It's very rare when you get into a night of drinking, you're on hour 3. It's very rare for you to then be like, I'm going to slow down and be responsible. You know what I mean? That's usually in the first 90 minutes, if you're lucky. So to me, again, it sounds like, there's speculation. Was he going to propose to Alexis? We don't know. Do I think that it proves anything if he was flirting with this woman? I don't. I think, again, he was very drunk. And I think that it's, in his mind, it was either he wasn't fully in his right state of mind and wasn't thinking about what he was doing, or he felt like it was harmless. It was also potentially her perception. Who knows? Doesn't matter. My point is there's 40 minutes of time where he could have drank, we don't know how much. So at this point, by 1:55, when he's going back into that bar, I just really feel like this guy is into the sauce. He's in there. Again, no judgment. I've lived in this place many times. But I say all of this because it feels like, in a sense, anything is possible. When we are intoxicated to that level, it's possible that what I alluded to earlier. Is it possible he went into a staff-only area and got another shirt? It kind of is. Is it possible he went out another door? and got into a van with other people? It kind of
Sure.
is. Is it possible he went out and tripped and fell into a construction site and wasn't seen somehow? It kind of is. So, because of all of that, to me, it all comes back to Clint's recollection of the night. I'm
Sure.
very curious what Clint's friend, was her name Meredith?
Yes.
I'm very curious about what her kind of story is about all of this, because it's interesting to me again, anytime someone lawyers up, when you're dealing with the
Sure.
disappearance of a friend, it just it's always going to seem sneaky, suspicious, etc. If you have
Sure.
nothing to hide, why are you lawyering up?
Yeah. I mean, look, I get the distrust of the police at the best
Sure.
of times, but it's just still surprising to be like, "Oh, I'm not gonna talk to you at all about this friend of mine." And I know that Clint has said they had a shot at each place, but you can't tell me they went into a bar, had a single shot, and then just, like, hung out and didn't drink anything else. Because it would have taken them half an hour to walk from the first bar to the very last bar, and they were gone for over 3 hours. So they obviously stayed at each one for a chunk of time.
Yeah.
So they probably had, yeah, maybe a shot at each, but also maybe a drink at each.
That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking it's like they got a shot and a beer or whatever, a shot and a drink. And it was like they did a shot, had a drink, and then when they
Yeah.
finished their drink, they moved on to the next place.
Oh, I could
So
see that.
then we're talking about double the booze, which again,
Yeah.
can't make this clearer, not a judgment ever.
No.
Just setting the stage that it's like, it's also, and look, I know it's kind of the blind leading the blind when you're as drunk as the person that you're with. But
Sure.
it just doesn't sit right with me. The fact that he wouldn't take a polygraph. What are you hiding? Because we all know that when we're talking about a disappearance or a murder, one of the number one questions the detective is going to ask the family of the person who's gone missing or has been killed, did anyone have an issue with this person? Was anyone fighting with this person? Those are always in the first couple of questions that
Yeah.
detective is going to ask the family, right?
Yes.
So to me, it feels like and I know that there was an illusion that they had gotten into a fight that night. So to me, it's
Right.
like that feels like where there's smoke, there's fire.
Sure.
Here's this is an absolute complete speculation, but go
Sure.
with me on this for a second. My question is, what was Clint's potential relationship to Alexis? Did he feel some sort of protection over her? Did he see or
Mhm.
hear that Brian was flirting with another girl? Did he confront Brian about this? Why are you doing that? You have this great girlfriend,
Sure.
etc. Could it be he had some sort of, not actual feelings, but whatever feelings, and was jealous that Brian was with Alexis. So then when he sees Brian flirting with someone else, he's like, how dare you? You have this great girl and this is the shit you're pulling. To me, it feels like there's just a piece of this that we'll never know because he lawyered up and refuses to take a polygraph. But it feels like the nature of the fight, it feels like there's some detail there that would shed some light on this. Because it feels like if nothing else, even if Clint was not involved or doesn't know anything else, it
Right.
feels like there is a reason why they split up. It wasn't just that he lost sight of him. I just don't buy that. I just don't, especially when you're only out with one person and then a total of two people. The group was a total of three at this point. I don't buy it. And Meredith wasn't as drunk as the other two, right? Or
I hope not, because
I
she
hope
drove
not.
them to
Exactly.
the final place.
So I'm curious what her whole recollection of all of this was and what has she said. Now, again, granted, she's friends with Clint, so who knows if we're getting the full story. But again, it just feels like that's unfortunately where there's got to be a detail that we're missing. There's got to be something that he knows that would lead to something. I think it's interesting that the psychic talked about him being in water. Um And then, of course, they have not found him in water, etc. But I was like, I am always curious about, does that mean that he, go with me on this,
Yeah.
does that mean that he passed out and choked on his own vomit and he drowned that way? Like, was there something to this psychic's vision, but it just wasn't 100%? You know what I mean? Like, is there another way
Sure.
into what she was talking about? I'm assuming it was a woman. I shouldn't have done that.
It was.
Okay, well, then maybe that's because I heard that and my brain logged it. But you know what I'm saying? I feel like it feels like Clint has to know something. It feels like, if nothing else, they parted ways in like an angry moment. And that's
Sure.
why he didn't want to say anything else. I'm not saying that he physically murdered Brian necessarily,
Sure.
but I'm saying that it's like he would have seemed culpable in some way.
Oh, yeah. I could see that. Especially, yeah, maybe he knew the girls. So is it possible he looked out? He said he saw Brian come back in. Does that mean he saw Brian, what he saw as flirting, whether Brian saw it as flirting or not? And then it was just that anger of like, you're about to go away on vacation with your girlfriend.
What are you doing?
What are you doing? Like, what I wouldn't give to find that cell phone.
Yep.
Is her phone number in it?
Great question.
I mean,
can they compel her cell phone? I mean, you know what I mean? Like, can we see now? Granted, she may have said that she only gave him her number.
Right.
So he may not have given her his. Fine. So that may not prove anything, but like, did he? Quite often, I'll speak to, again, my experience. I like that I'm speaking to my experience with alcohol, but also with getting numbers in bars. Quite often what people do is they take your phone and they put in your number, and then they either text themselves from your phone, or
Sure.
right? Like, usually there's an exchange that happens so that you have each other's numbers.
That makes sense.
So I'm curious about, like, yeah, can we, like, what about that? Can the police, did they look at her phone? Can she show? Only because then that does add that layer of, okay, this was clearly flirtatious, which again does add a layer to what this fight could have potentially been about. Now, obviously, also, the fight could have been about absolutely anything. Don't get me wrong. They were both intoxicated at this point. It could have been because somebody said something about the sky is blue. No, it's green. Who knows? But it just feels like the fact that he's never been found, the fact that Clint won't take the polygraph. It always comes back to that for me, because again, to me, it's like, I will never understand not knowing, oh, then I lost sight of my friend. And I will never understand not being willing to be like, I will, of course, tell you absolutely everything. This is my friend. Of course, I want to try and find this person. To me, it's just like such an obvious admission of some kind of guilt. Again, I'm not saying he killed him, but I'm saying it's like he's hiding something. It's the only reason you refuse a polygraph when your friend has gone missing, to me.
Oh, yeah. It is more than possible that it could be as simple as what you're saying is they got in some sort of argument, and he knows if it comes up on a polygraph that they got into some sort of argument, that the police are going to try and twist that into like, well, then you know more than what you're saying. And it's like, who knows? Maybe he got angry and was just like, forget it. Let's just leave him. And he feels guilty because he left him, because we, of course, have no idea where he went. Yeah. And I did say what I wouldn't give for that cell phone. Obviously, I would like him found.
Of course.
Because that would answer a lot of questions. But
it's interesting, too, the phone pinging in the suburbs 6 months later, I believe it was 3 or 6 months later.
Yeah.
There's something there. And I understand that it's more than possible that it could be a glitch that it rang 3 times.
Sure.
Yes, I get that. But explain to me how it's pinging in a completely, well, like, is it a glitch that it pinged there? To me, it's like, that's not a glitch. Is it? And how is it that this phone 6 months later would be on enough to ping? Because the phone has to be on to ping, right? The phone, if your phone is dead or turned off, it can't ping on a tower.
Right.
That's a fact. So the phone was on because it pinged on a tower. That feels like what I'm saying is fact.
Right.
Unless it's a complete glitch, which, okay. But to me, it's like, if that phone suddenly had a charge or suddenly was turned on or whatever, like, I feel like that's a huge clue that it feels like was kind of just written off.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think it's crazy, the thought that she called that phone for so long, and all of a sudden, just one time, there was actually, like, ringing, and that it could ping in an area, which was super close by. So then it's like, so what's that mean? Did somebody else have his phone? I doubt he was randomly still in that area for like 6 months later. If he was leaving to go off and have this new life or whatever he was doing, he's not going to stick around in the area.
No.
He's going to go off and do that beach dream or whatever, but even then, how's he going to make that work?
Well, with no access to any money,
Right?
because he never accessed his accounts.
Nope.
I just feel like, yeah, I don't know. And to me, is it possible that his phone got dropped somewhere, somebody picked it up and sold it to somebody else? Sure, that's possible. But
Sure.
again, then how is it 6 months later pinging with his number,
Nearby.
right? Because
Yeah.
if your phone gets stolen and sold, it'll get like wiped and then it would be somebody else's number. So it
Yeah.
doesn't, there's just, again, it just feels like there's some pieces here that just do not make sense at all to me. And the first place that I would go, which I'm sure police detectives would love, like, oh, where would you go? What would be your thing? But to me, it's like, I would look at like, who are all of the people directly connected to him? And then
Sure.
do any of them have connections to people in that area? That would be the first thing I would look at after that happens. Is there
Sure.
anybody in the orbit? Because he may not even be in the orbit, but to me, it's like, it's worth looking at.
Yes. Oh, yes.
The other thing I wrote down, I think you're going to really love this, regarding Gabriel Nagy
Yeah.
and his dissociative fugue, which I'm not suggesting is not a real thing. I believe that those fugue states are a real thing. But what I wrote down about him was, show me the head scans and show me the psych report. Because I think it's very convenient that it's like, oh, he remembers waking up from getting hit in the head and then he doesn't remember any world events. I'm like, I just don't believe anybody about anything. And I think that it's
Sure.
like, couldn't he also just lie? And if you asked him about Desert Storm, couldn't he just say, I don't know what that is? Like, are we believing him?
Probably.
So again, to me, it's like, show me an X-ray or a CAT scan that shows that he has a head trauma. Show me the psych report that says, you know what I'm
Mhm.
saying?
Yeah. Show her the receipts.
Show me the receipts. And I know what people are saying, like, oh, you don't believe. No, I don't, because I don't believe anything anymore.
Oh, yeah.
I'm questioning a man showing up with a package of mine. I'm questioning him tampering my face creams. So yeah, like, no. I don't believe shit. I don't believe shit until I
Yeah.
have to. Until I've shown the proof.
This show may have broken us.
Well, yeah, it for sure did. For sure. For sure.
Altered in
It
a
is what
way.
It is. It is what
Altered
it
in a
is.
way. Yeah.
Altered, yeah. But anyway, all of this to say, I mean, I don't know if you have any other thoughts or theories, but to me, I just feel like there's got to be a smoking gun, and to me, I feel like it lies with Clint. And anytime, and it's the same thing I said in the Rennie Joe's episode, where it's like, anytime people are lawyering up and refusing to talk and refusing polygraphs, there's no way for that not to look completely suspicious. Because
Yeah.
again, you know as well as I do that if you have absolutely nothing to hide, there's no reason why you wouldn't do a polygraph.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this, again, I said it before, I'll say it again. I get why this was chosen. I get why there's the hope that we'll find something about it, but it's just going out and then just disappearing, like vanishing into thin air. I just, like, it's maddening because there are so many options that could happen, but I just do not believe he just was like, you know what, I'm checking out. I'm just going to head out, get on a boat, and we'll see what happens. Like, I just don't believe he went off to purposely live his life. And yeah, I would love to have a conversation. No, I would love to hear someone's conversation with Clint. I love that I was going to say my own, but I was like, no. I want to know, like, just tell me what you remember from that night. And that's all I want to know.
Yeah.
And then sit down with Meredith. What do you remember from that night? And to anybody that was there that night, was there a band? If so, what band? Can we figure out where they were next? Does the band know anything about it? Because by the time the police found out about this, if it was a band from out of town, if there was a band, the band would be gone. Did they look into the band and speak with the band? Because if the odds of them just driving to another city and a guy that's like, hey, I'll come with you because he's drunk and we make terrible mistakes when we're drunk. Look, I once woke up using a bath mat as a blanket in the bathroom in my very early 20s. Yeah, it's something I think of often because when I woke up, I was like, shit, I do not recall even getting home.
Yeah.
But somehow I at least made it to the bathroom, but then decided I'm just going to lie down right here instead of go to my bedroom, which was not far away. Kudos, I made it all the way to the house though. But the point is, when you're at that state, you just, yeah. If anyone's like, hey, you want to do this? You're like, greatest idea I've ever heard. Get in the car. Like, you're just like, yep, let's do this. And so if they were like, hey, man, do you want to join our band? Or if in his mind he thought they asked, or they were like, yeah, you can come with us if you want. We're headed to this town. And he's like, I'd love that. It's possible he got in that vehicle and went somewhere else. But again, was there a band or not? And again, if you were going to come out with a second one, how was it not just simply ugly number 2 na Saluna? Like, why was it just not a 2 NA Saluna?
I know that the wordplay is going to haunt you.
It will be one of those things that destroys me until the end of my days.
The only other thing I'm going to say, because this just made the penny drop as you were saying that, the only other thing, as I am pulling on again my extensive experience being out and drunk.
Yes.
What's the other thing? If we are out, if anyone is out, but if we are out and we are on hour 4 and we are into the booze, into the sauce, what is the number one thing that becomes a priority?
Food. Yeah.
That's the other thing. The only other thing that comes to mind for me that, again, if I was the detective, I would follow. Is there someone there that was like, we're going to go get food. Do you want to come? Was it this band? We're going to go get something to eat. Do you want to come? Something that got him out of that location.
Yeah.
Somehow, secretly, etc., under the cover of darkness, seemingly in plain sight. But
yeah,
that's the only other thing to me that could be a real motivator. And then is it that they never made it there? It was somebody who was not a good person. You know what I mean? Like, was that what it was? Is it just that it got him into a completely different area and then he got completely lost thinking that he was in his same area? So then when he tried to walk home from there, he got completely lost. He ran into somebody who wasn't great, or some accident happened in a completely different spot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That wasn't properly investigated, or who knows? You know, was it a construction spot somewhere completely different?
It's possible.
You know what I mean? Like again, to me, it's yeah. If you put yourself in the mindset of him at that time, to me, it's like, that's the only other thing that comes to mind, is that if you've been solid drinking for 3 to 4 hours, what's all of a sudden going to become a real priority, even if you've eaten at some point in that time.
Yep.
Doesn't matter. 3 to 4 hours, you're going to be like, when's my next, what are we doing? I want to eat something.
Yeah.
Let's eat
nachos, hot dog, anything. Get it. Yeah.
And it's late enough that there's not, I'm speculating now. I'm going to assume not necessarily a lot of options open. So if
True.
he is getting into a van with a band, et cetera, or whatever, bands know 24-hour spots for food.
Sure.
100%. And 2, it's not going to be abnormal that it's a bit of a drive, that it's going to be taking him far away. Is it possible that on that van drive, again, that's when he passed out, he chokes on his own vomit for example, and then there's like, holy shit, what do we do? And the body is buried. You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
to me, it just feels like, yeah, if nothing, but what it all comes back to again is, but it still feels like Clint is not giving up, and Meredith, I'll put it to both places. It still feels like there is a detail that we're not getting. And saying that the last time he was seen was by that stage door, to me, has as much credibility as saying you saw him get into a spaceship, because you're not going onto, you're not doing it on a lie detector. So
yeah.
Well, listen, this one's going to haunt me.
Yep.
And yeah, to your point, I see why people chose this, because it really is confounding. It's like, I don't know. The fact, again, someone is seen entering a building and never seen leaving. That is, I mean, compelling at best.
Yeah.
But listen, Christy Oxborrow, fabulous job as always. Amazing work. So many true crime bits in there.
I shoved a lot of true crime in there.
I liked it. I liked it a lot. And thank you, dear listeners, for following along, for coming with us on this journey. We're so appreciative for your support. If you haven't already, give us a follow on the socials on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at True Crime and Cocktails, on Twitter at Not Detectives. Of course, if you'd like a little bit more bonus content, there is bonus episodes. We do 4 episodes a month, a live monthly Q&A, the poll, much like this episode was voted on Patreon, patreon.com/True Crime and Cocktails. Go over there to learn more about that. And of course, the only place for official True Crime and Cocktails merch is truecrewmerch.com. So check that out as well. Halloween merch is alive and well over there right now. We brought back the design from last year, as well as a new Bert and Larry special Halloween design. So get it while you can. Christy, do you want to tell the people about next week's episode?
Oh. On the next True Crime and Cocktails, Unsolved Mysteries, Will Hendrick.
Going back to our OG roots. An unsolved mystery, ladies and gentlemen and people. Cannot wait for that. Christy, do you want to say goodnight to the people?
Welcome back to music, Brittany.
Oh, what a delight.